Chapter 1660. As a user of brainwaves, Wang Ming naturally knew the danger of connecting two brainwaves in series. It was easy for him to hypnotize himself into jia bugui, but if he got too immersed in his role, there was a high chance that he wouldn't be able to come out in the end. However, this was only a small portion of Wang Ming's brain waves. Even if something really did happen when the time came, it would at most be this small portion of his brain waves that would be assimilated, and wouldn't have any impact on the main body in the outside world. After a few minutes, he opened his eyes with a flushed face. Jia Bugui's body had clearly become scalding hot from the operation of the brainwaves, and there was even steam rising from the top of his head. For the time being, it's a success. Wang Ming nodded. I've already homogenized his brainwaves, so I can become him at any time without being detected by the willpower guards. In terms of movement, I have already used my own brainwaves to implant suggestions. You only need to use certain gestures or sounds to control Boss Jia's body to move around. In other words, you haven't completely connected yet? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal asked. That's right. Completely connecting the brain waves and twisting the two brain waves into a rope, in my opinion, this was the last step that had to be taken. Because once I'm connected, I'll become Jia Bugui, and it's hard to say whether I'll be able to back out, Wang Ming replied. At the moment, he was still in a semi-connected state. Because of the brainwaves, he had become Jia Bugui, which was probably unexpected for the heartless patriarch and his disciple. Wang Ming was also well aware of how important his role was. Therefore, he had to make use of his identity to play every move well. If he made the slightest mistake, everyone here would be at risk of being exposed. And the plan that grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had painstakingly entrusted to this Senior Xiang Yi for so many years would completely turn into bubbles. The people sitting here weren't idiots. Naturally, they could also imagine what Wang Ming was thinking and what his concerns were. It was just as Wang Ming had said. He had to use the identity of Jia Bugui to deceive the heartless patriarch and his disciple through the willpower guard and lure them into the trap they had set. This was already the last step. At that moment, Qin Zong stared at Wang Ming's Jia Bugui face for a long time before he suddenly thought of something and asked, "Come to think of it, it wasn't just our group who infiltrated this world, right? I ran into Brother Zhua and classmate Z. Then I met you guys." Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, it was because I saw Miss Rong and Miss Yoshiko's text message. At that time, Brother Dog and I happened to be investigating Shochong's kidnapping, and in the end, we didn't expect to track them to the edge of this illusory land of nothingness. Hearing this, Zhuo was shocked. It was actually Master's wife who sent you a message. No wonder Yoshiko followed you here. It seems that when I sent her the message, she was probably right next to me. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal sweated. So they came here because they saw your text message, Brother Zhua? They even called Senior Golden Lamp along in passing. I'm afraid so. Then how do you know about this nihility illusory realm? Naturally, it's Senior Li Xian and Senior Zhang Zipi. They should be the first group to explore this illusory realm. Hearing this, everyone fell into a long silence. It turned out that the real purpose behind this string of nesting dolls was actually to switch maps for the battle sect team building activity. Are these two seniors very strong? Qin Zong asked again at that moment. It wasn't just him, even Xiang Yi had a puzzled expression on his face. After all, the two of them were the only outsiders in this battle sect team building activity. These two are 10,000 level experts. Loopy Toad, with its head of lush green hair, also said with a face full of sweat. Hence, after the current analysis, the people in the tavern suddenly discovered an incomparably stiff problem. The first group to enter was Li Xian and Zhang Zipei. The second group was Zhua, Zhou Zi, and Qin Zong. The third group was Lotus Sun, Jamiya Yoshiko, and Golden Lamp. And now, the fourth group was grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, Loopy Toad, Xiang Yi, and Wang Ming, who had already merged with the second group. Their current plan was to use the willpower guards to deceive the heartless ancestor. To get more information out of him. But now, in a situation where their actions didn't match up, it was very likely that this would result in a false start, that was, the other two groups would be completely unaware of the heartless ancestors' plan. They would directly rush over and destroy this willpower guard. Obviously, everyone thought of this and couldn't help feeling a little worried for a moment. It looks like we have to get to the core area as soon as possible and meet up with them. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal smiled bitterly. To be honest, this trip to the illusory land of nothingness had turned out like this. He was partly to blame. He had originally wanted to hide something and investigate in secret. In the end, he hadn't expected other people to also notice this place. But to enter the core area openly, we need to prepare a pass. The market price for a pass is currently 20 million gold gear coins. Plus the 60 million silver gear coins that Brother Qin Zong earned. I'm afraid that won't be enough for us, said Audiobook. That's easy. If I count my money, buying a few passes won't be a problem. It won't be a problem to buy a few. Xiang Yi stood up. After all, he had been asked very early on to be stationed in this world as the head of the waste recycling station, and had accumulated some money. How much can you buy? Based on my family assets, with my meager savings, I can probably buy 3 of them. Xiang Yi did some calculations. Xiang Yi calculated 3 passes for 60 million gold gear coins. Everyone was stunned, and they all looked at him with admiration in their eyes. Is recycling so profitable these days? It's just a trivial trick, Xiang Yi said with a modest smile. But even so, apart from Wang Ming, who had Jia Bugui's identity, there were still 3 people in their group of 7 who didn't meet the requirements to enter the core area. If it's 33, it might work, said Wang Ming. Mr. Ming, you mean, it's not like there aren't any poor people in the core area. However, those who are shabby are mostly slaves and servants that these nobles bought from the slums outside. Wang Ming said, how about this, we'll continue with our current group. Have Brother Xiang Yi give the 3 passes to Odd Brothers' group. Senior Immortal, Brother Xiang Yi and Loopy Toad will have to trouble you to enter the city with me. Of course, no problem. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal said, then, where should we meet up after we enter the city? Jia Bugui has an astrology club in the core area. Let's meet up there, said Wang Ming at that moment. Chapter 1661. When Wang Ming decided to use Jia Bugui's identity to lead Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's group into the core area, the faces of several women instantly flashed through his mind. As one of the few bigwigs in the core area who ran all kinds of brothels and had almost monopolized the market, Jia Bugui had a natural advantage in the core area, but in fact, he also had a lot of debts. These debts weren't about money, but about love affairs. When it came to love, Wang Ming had always been single-minded. He had never truly fallen in love with anyone, but once he had given his feelings, he was determined to the end. In fact, when his brainwaves had entered Jia Bugui's body back then, Wang Ming had his own concerns. The main reason was that he had sensed Jia Bugui's romantic nature, and was worried that it would contaminate his pure self and make him unclean. But considering that Jia Bugui's identity would indeed be helpful to their mission plan, Wang Ming had finally made up his mind to take control of his body. Thus, Wang Ming had completely activated Jia Bugui's brainwaves and merged them with Wang Ming's brainwaves. This was Wang Ming's final step in facing death with equanimity. In any case, this was just a small portion of his brainwaves that had been separated from his body. If it was contaminated later, he might as well not put it back. Staying here forever was, in fact, the better choice. Everyone set out one after another. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, Audiobook and Wang Ming led the 2 carriages, and deliberately set off after some time. Audiobook and the others went first. Just like that, they saw the only exclusive main road. The core area of the technology city. Shrouded in the glitter of jewels and treasures, the imperial city, which gave off an extravagant aura, appeared in front of everyone. In the center of the city, above the ancient castle, the light beam that connected all the guards and the powerful defensive barrier was released from the top of the tower. Like a birdcage, it formed an umbrella-shaped protection that enveloped the entire imperial city. Looks like that's the target. Audiobook was a little astonished when he saw this scene from a distance. He thought that after so many days at Wang Ling's side, he had witnessed a lot of big scenes. But as he stood here now, the scene in front of him made him tremble slightly and a little out of control. Was this the power of an ancient expert? Although he had already faintly felt some pressure when he was in the slums, but when he really entered the core area of the imperial city, he felt a little pressure. This world constructed by an immemorial rank powerhouse using the strongest laws was presented before him, and his heart was shaken. For the first time, Audiobook couldn't understand it. Of course, what made him feel even more unreachable right now was not the pressure from the laws of these ancient powerhouses. Instead, he was thinking about something else, that was Wang Ling. He knew very well how powerful Wang Ling was. But the truth was that Wang Ling had never shown 100% of his combat strength in front of him. The laws created by the ancient powerhouses were enough to make him feel this way. If one day he completely removed the talisman seal, what kind of scene would that be? In the team voice space, Audiobook, Zhou Zi, and Qin Zong created a separate space to communicate in secret so that the hired driver in front wouldn't hear their plan. That must be the light beam that connects to the willpower guardian. Qin Zong rubbed his chin and narrowed his eyes. They were still very far from the ancient castle, but the light beam emitted from the top of the castle made him feel a little uncomfortable. "This light makes me uncomfortable," he said. "Me too." Zhou Zi shivered. He had the lowest realm among them. If it wasn't for the 5 layers of long johns he was wearing, he suspected that he would have fainted as soon as they entered the imperial city. But no matter how uncomfortable it is, we have to endure it first. For now, we still have to think of a way to lure out the heartless ancestor and his disciple. There should be a lot of ways to destroy this light beam. Saying this, he suddenly asked Qin Zong, "By the way, I don't think I've seen you use any magic treasures." "I have weapons too. I just don't use it often," Qin Zong said, spreading his hands. "And it has been upgraded to a chaotic artifact for a while. It's just that every time I use them, the situation is already perfectly resolved, so there's no place for me to use them." "Are you showing off something?" "No, Brother Zhua. I'm telling the truth." Qin Zong laughed. "I'm just a little luckier than the others, you can't blame me." Click. At that moment, a shutter flashed as Audiobook took a photo of Qin Zong. "Qin Zong? Audiobook, didn't you say you were luckier? I'll take a photo of you and forward it to see if this mission will go smoothly." Zhou Zi clutched his stomach and burst into laughter. "Brother Zhua, you think Brother Qin Zong is a coy fish? Forward it to a collection of good luck?" For a moment, the atmosphere in the carriage fell silent. After a few seconds, Qin Zong suddenly felt the atmosphere drop to a visible freezing point. Holding his phone, he could see that it was trembling. "Brother Zhua?" Qin Zong asked tentatively. I sent it, Zhou Zi and Qin Zong. F***K. Isn't this illusory world equivalent to another world? Why is there a mobile signal? Audiobook was horrified. Was this the same world, the same mobile signal? He had originally wanted to post Qin Zong's photo in his WeChat moments, and had planned to set it as a private photo that only he could see, in order to avoid Kumi or Yoko's misunderstanding. In the end, he had just been absent-minded and had directly sent it out. Furthermore, it just so happened that he was about to die. Not only had Kumi or Yoko seen it, she had even given him a like, so now, Audiobook instantly broke out in a cold sweat. "It's over, it's all over." At that moment, inside the carriage, Audiobook felt the sky go black as he looked up. "I'm here, sister-in-law probably won't do anything to you." Qin Zong laughed. To be honest, he also wasn't sure why such a coincidence had happened. But generally speaking, given the current situation, it looked like Audiobook was the unlucky one. As long as they were together in the world, Qin Zong felt that they would definitely have extraordinary luck in other areas because of the accumulation of luck. In short, Brother Zhua, don't think too much about it. I'm wondering if I should go to the coffin shop and order a coffin for me now. Audra dropped his forehead into his hand. In this imperial city, Jiabugui, who is possessed by Mr. Ming, has eyes and ears everywhere. He'll definitely find a way to find the other two groups led by Master's wife and Senior Li Xian. That was true, but Audra felt that he already didn't have the face to meet Kimi or Yoko. Haha, Brother Zhua is right. But have you ever thought that we might run into sister-in-law on the road? Said Qin Zong. No way. Audra abruptly raised his head at these words. Qin Zong had just been joking in passing. Who would have thought that as soon as he said this, outside the window of the carriage, three familiar cloaked figures brushed past their carriage. Audra looked at Qin Zong in horror. Excuse me, has your mouth been blessed? Qin Zong, ? Chapter 1662. Although this group of people were wearing masks and cloaks, when the carriage passed by, Audra could still sense a hint of coldness emanating from under the cloaks, and he could tell that one of them was Jimi or Yoko. He broke out in a cold sweat on the spot, making Qin Zong very nervous for a moment. He had just wanted to make a joke, and hadn't really planned on running into Jimi or Yoko on the road. In the end, he hadn't expected luck to be used in this kind of place, and he had hit the nail on the head. Of course, Qin Zong hadn't expected Audra to be this scared. It looked like he would most likely be the henpecked type in the future. In the carriage, they had a tacit understanding not to disturb Lotus Sun and the others. Instead, when the carriage passed an alley, they quietly gave the coachman some money to quietly follow them. Audra had mustered up his courage to do this, even though he only dared to let the coachman follow them secretly for now. The main thing was that he didn't know what Ryoko would do if she discovered him. Their purpose in going to the astrology club was to find the remaining two groups as soon as possible to avoid any mishaps. In the end, they had run into Jimi or Ryoko on the way here, which was like delivering a pillow to them when they were feeling sleepy. Audra had initially thought that cell phone signals wouldn't work in this alternate world, but after the incident in his WeChat moments just now, he instantly saw the light. He immediately wrote 2 messages and sent them to grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, telling them their current location and that they had found Jimi or Yoko. The other message was sent to Li Xian and Zhang Zizi, but it was more reliable to let grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's physical body inform these 2 ancient seniors. The 2 of them had only just come into contact with modern things like cell phones, and weren't particularly familiar with how to operate them, so it was inevitable that something unexpected would happen. After doing all this, Audra breathed a slight sigh of relief. He quietly pulled open the curtains on the side of the carriage and peeked out the window at Jimi or Ryoko and the others who were hurrying along. What on earth are they going to do? Audra murmured. And it seems they specially switched masks with Ryoko. Are they afraid she'll be targeted? Do they want to keep her safe? Audra's words were enough of an inspiration. Qin Zong of Qin Zong rubbed his chin and abruptly said, "A dojo challenge in an underground boxing arena costs nearly 6 million gold gear coins and a pass. And sister-in-law's employer was the police chief, Dekars. He himself was here for the pass. Then how did sister-in-law and the other 2 people get their passes?" "Oh right." Zhou Zi nodded. "Even if the director gives all the bonus to Yoshiko, a communication pass from the core zone is worth 20 million gold gear coins. That's not enough." Bingo. So the only explanation is that someone is sponsoring them. Qin Zong snapped his fingers and said with a calm expression, "The person who is most likely to sponsor is the boxing arena operator, Zhu Yuanrun." "Is it because Senior Golden Lamp saved him from the Black Dragon?" Audra frowned. Judging from Zhu Yuanrun's hostility towards them in the beginning, he felt that this person was not a nice person. Furthermore, such a cunning person who thought of all sorts of ways to use improper means to trip up his opponent had actually admitted defeat so openly. This also made Audra vaguely feel that something wasn't right. "It seems that Brother Zhua and I both think that this Zhu Yuanrun isn't a good person." In the carriage, Qin Zong folded his arms and analyzed, "When all is said and done, this Zhu Yuanrun is just a capitalist who doesn't get up early without profit. This kind of person? It's impossible for him to make a loss. That's why he gave them extra passes." Someone must be helping Zhu Yuanrun to lure the enemy deep into their territory. Odd Zhua and Zhou Zi heard this. They were all silent and deep in thought. The main thing was that Qin Zong's calm analysis made everything sound so reasonable. It could almost be described as impeccable. Of course, Qin Zong actually wasn't too sure about this conclusion. That's just my point of view. Brother Zhua and Brother Zi can just listen to it. They might also be confused. Confused? A koi fish like you can also be confused? Odd Zhua laughed in his heart. In fact, Qin Zong hadn't confessed his true identity to Odd Zhua at all, but Odd Zhua already regarded him as a koi fish in his heart. Everything was so natural. But now? The carriage wheels came to a stop again. The driver at the front lifted the curtain. Sirs? The area in front is a private residence? The carriage could not go in. I saw that the lords you were chasing had already entered through the entrance. Okay. Many thanks. Odd Zhua nodded. Soon after, they also got off the car. Was it as the coachman had said? What Odd Zhua and the others saw was a magnificent mansion with richly ornamented beams and painted rafters, on which all kinds of ancient mechanical beasts were carved, perfectly blending in with the style of this world. Including the plaque decorated with neon lights on the door, the words, D Manor, were written on the flickering lights. So this is the official residence of that director? Odd Zhua stood at the door in a daze. Then, he started to pace as well. He followed Kyuya Ryoko and the others in. His intuition had always been accurate. He had a feeling that something bad was about to happen. Even though Odd Zhua knew very well that Monk Jin Deng was here. Even if they encountered great danger, it would not be a problem. However, he still had to protect his own woman. This was what a real boyfriend should be like. Should they split into two groups and take the other carriage? As expected, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal and the others, who had entered the core city as servants, received news from Odd Zhua. As expected, Brother Zhua is very lucky. Not long after entering the city, we ran into Miss Rong and Miss Ryoko, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal said with a smile. Actually, he had already expected this outcome. After all, Odd Zhua was with that one and only koi in the cultivation world. Then are we still going to the astrology club? Xiang Yi asked. We still have to. Every week, a large number of dignitaries pour in to divine the stars and fortune. Although finding these two people in this imperial city is like looking for a needle in a haystack, it's not as difficult as you think. Wang Ming nodded as he used his brainwaves to transmit the location of the astrology club to everyone else's minds. This was a real-time map. The flashing red moving dot was their current location, and the destination of the astrology club was marked with a yellow asterisk. It was clear at a glance. It's actually this astrology club? Xiang Yi was startled when he saw the mark on the map. What, you've been there before? Loopy Toad raised its eyebrows and asked. That's right. Come to think of it, it's a coincidence that I actually run a tobacco, alcohol and snacks shop next to the astrology club. I'm the behind-the-scenes boss of that shop. Furthermore, today is the day of the special sale. Special sale? All kinds of snacks. Limited edition figs, limited edition lollipops, limited edition crispy noodle snacks, and so on. The rich and powerful may not be interested in these little things, but the children of the rich and powerful are very happy to buy them. They often carry them back home in boxes for the card collecting event. Xiang Yi laughed. Sure enough, it's the easiest to earn money from children. Otherwise, where do you think I got my 60 million gold gear coins from? Hearing this, everyone in Battle's sect couldn't help falling silent. Limited edition crispy noodle snacks, and it was a limited edition crispy noodle snack from another world. For some reason, everyone in Battle's sect had a feeling at that moment. Perhaps that man was coming. Chapter 1663. Tomorrow was his birthday. Actually, Wang Ling hadn't been looking forward to it since there had been too many mishaps on his birthdays in the past, and he had long since passed the age where he could look forward to birthdays. Every birthday told Wang Ling that he had grown a year older, and that he had become even more powerful. For Wang Ling himself, before he found a way to completely control his combat strength, every birthday was nothing more than a reminder that God had stuffed another spoonful of gunpowder into his body. His peers were now looking forward to their birthdays, but Wang Ling hoped that time could pass a little slower. As far as he could remember, he had never had a birthday party since he was 7 years old. Because it was hard to imagine him being able to blow out a candle and create a fire escape grand fireball technique, and directly burn down his home, so this year's birthday present was the same as in previous years. With Wang Ling's permission, Father and Mother Wang still gave him the option to buy something he liked. 17 years old. This year's birthday gift red packets seemed to be more generous than in previous years. Surprisingly, Father Wang wasn't stingy. The couple stuffed 17,000 HNY into the red packets. For Wang Ling, this was shockingly a huge sum of money. When he opened the red packets, he received the couple's heartfelt wishes. On each bright red banknote was written beautifully in pencil, "Happy birthday, son." Father Wang had been fiddling with these 170 banknotes in his study for a long time last night. He had written a lot of well wishes online, and after sorting out his thoughts, he had planned to transcribe them on the banknotes bit by bit. Later, he realized that there were too many well wishes, and it seemed that these 170 banknotes weren't enough to fully express his feelings. Thus, out of all the words he wanted to say, there was only one sentence left: "Happy birthday." But Wang Ling didn't intend to spend all this money. The main thing was that he couldn't think of what he wanted to buy, and what he really wanted to buy was a certain snack from the snack shop, which was so cheap that he didn't need to spend so much money at all. After putting the money away, Wang Ling planned to go to the bank and deposit this huge sum of money into his account. Just as he was about to teleport away, little girl Nwan had crawled over at some point and tugged at his trousers. Actually, Wang Ling had recently realized that this little girl especially liked to stick to him. And he was not a person who liked to be stuck to by others. Perhaps it was because they were related by blood, but he didn't reject Nwan's clinginess at all. Wang Ling looked at Wang Nwan. "Do you want to come with me?" Wang Nwan exclaimed, "Ah." Therefore, he half squatted down and picked little girl Nwan up. His movements were smooth and natural, and he could not find any mistakes. In fact, this was the result of Wang Ling practicing it many times in private with Loopy Toad, mainly because he was afraid that he would be too stiff and make his little sister uncomfortable. Seeing that Wang Ling had picked her up, little girl Nwan was also happy. Her chubby body leaned against Wang Ling's shoulder like a little fat bird perched on his shoulder. She liked to nestle in her big brother's position. The whole scene was so warm that it was unbelievable. If there was someone else watching, they would definitely feel that it was unreal. Although he hadn't shown any expression from beginning to end, this gentle gesture and the way he treated his little sister with such care and gentleness always felt unreal from Wang Ling, the role model of our generation. After depositing the money, the whole process took less than half an hour. The specific time taken was shown below. Wang Ling used the Great Teleportation spell to move to the nearest bank. The whole process took less than a second. Wang Ling noticed that the ATM machines were under maintenance, so he took the initiative to take a number and wait for it to be processed manually. There were a lot of people on Saturday. Then, he had to queue for a full 27 minutes before his turn was called. Then, it was time for the manual deposit, which took another 2 minutes, but thanks to this time in the queue, Wang Ling was able to sort out his thoughts about what he wanted this year. He felt that the other world's limited flavor crispy noodle snacks in the land of nothingness seemed pretty good. It was just that the currency in the real world couldn't be used to buy them. But the truth was that Wang Ling had some savings in that world. Because not long after grenade-throwing senior Immortal had realized that there was a land of nothingness in the North Pole, Wang Ling had in fact already noticed its existence. Because of the other world's limited flavor crispy noodle snacks, they were only available in limited quantities every year. Actually, Wang Ling had resisted the urge to uproot this strange world. Of course, he also clearly knew what on earth these people were planning, whether it was an old ancient divine weapon or a new one. Wang Ling thought that if someone really thought that they could rule the universe with this scrap of metal, that would be a little too whimsical. The truth was that no matter how old or new an ancient divine weapon was, it was impossible for it to withstand the power of one punch from him. Today was his birthday, and it just so happened that the other world's limited edition Gear crispy noodle snacks were on sale in this world. It was said that anyone who drew a crispy noodle snack with a golden Gear card in its packaging would receive a free pack of neon rainbow crispy noodle snacks. Wang Ling didn't know how much better it tasted than other crispy noodle snacks, but he knew a little about its effects. It was said that as long as you ate neon rainbow crispy noodle snacks, for the next few days when you went to the toilet, the stuff in the toilet would also turn a beautiful rainbow color, and it would last for a full 7 days. Limited edition crispy noodle snacks sometimes weren't necessarily sold for flavor, but could also be sold for novelty. Ordinary crispy noodle snacks were no longer able to satisfy Wang Ling's needs. These novelty flavor crispy noodle snacks indeed gave Wang Ling a different feeling. They gave him a sense of satisfaction. Of course, when Wang Ling entered the illusory world of nothingness, he had a disguise. His name in this illusory land of nothingness was a single name, which was the word Jean, after the word Ling had been removed. For the bosses of all the game parlors in the core area, this name was an absolute nightmare. Because game parlors were Wang Ling's main source of income in this world's currency. As for An Wan, as long as she was in shadow form, she could stay on Wang Ling's shoulder without anyone noticing. Thus, when Wang Ling put on the white fox mask which he had prepared beforehand and swaggered into one of the game parlors in the Imperial City, almost in a split second, the game parlors went into level 1 alert mode. It's Jean. God, Jean has appeared again. Is he going to smash the boxing machine again today? When the person in charge of the game parlors saw the familiar figure enter the surveillance room, he instantly broke out in a cold sweat. Staring at Wang Ling's figure, he immediately ordered the person next to him, quickly find someone to calm him down, then inform Boss Jia at once and ask him if he has any countermeasures. Didn't the boss go to that underground boxing arena? He came back a long time ago. He's now at the astrology club next door. Good. I'll go ask him right away. Chapter 1664. Illusory Realm, the core area of the Imperial City, in the central hall of the huge ancient castle. An old gentleman wearing a gold-rimmed monocle sat on a dazzling king's chair inlaid with all kinds of beautiful crystals. He held a black scepter in his hands and squinted his eyes into slits, exuding an air of unfathomable depth. The most eye-catching part of his extremely distinctive face was the pitch-black mole at the corner of his mouth. Your Excellency, the Black Dragon has been captured. But by the time we caught him, he had already killed 3 past commanders. A spherical guard floating in the air entered the palace and reported the current situation in an electronic voice. This matter should not be made public. The previous commanders also had backup bodies. Have they been replaced? Na Wei held on to his scepter and replied indifferently. All of them have been replaced with newly developed antique divine weapon androids. Up until now, the families of these killed commanders still haven't reacted. This matter has been handled beautifully. Na Wei smiled. Shouchong and the Black Dragon are both in place. The merging of the brain of God has been completed. Now we just have to wait for Mr. Na Wei Gong to offer up his body. Have they arrived? Yes, Your Excellency Na Wei. They have already entered Daika's mansion. Immediately send people over and surround the mansion. We must capture Gong alive. Try not to damage her body. Yes, Your Excellency. After making all these arrangements, Na Wei heaved a long sigh of relief on the king's chair. Back then, his master, the heartless ancestor, had divided a portion of his left and right brain tissues. One of them had been implanted into his body when the Black Dragon had been created. The other was in Shouchong's body. After years of painstaking preparation, the brain of God had finally been assembled. This made Na Wei very happy. Of course, there was one thing that made him even happier. He had discovered a body that was more suitable for creating antique divine weapons and mass-producing them. If he could obtain such a body, he could replace the existing materials with the latest bionic technology. His antique divine weapon would be peerless and invincible. Following the address Dekars had given them, Lotus Sun and the others smoothly arrived at D Manor. Back in the slums, Skady had already built and operated this magnificent private mansion in the core area through his connections and channels. It was all for the sake of waiting for the day when he obtained the pass and became a true superior. Then, he could directly move his family into this magnificent mansion. This was the lifelong dream of all lowly people. Although Dikas was different from the ordinary, lowly people, as he was the most hopeful person among the ascenders in the slums to enter the core area and move to this huge and magnificent imperial city, the ascenders were still classified as lowly in the archive. The only difference was that their assets and connections were incomparable to those of ordinary scums. They belonged to the higher stages of scums. But now, the situation had completely changed. Dikas had finally realized his long-awaited dream. He could live in a large mansion that he had prepared long ago and settle down comfortably in this imperial city. He could have 8 or 10 wives, raise a bunch of cute children, and live the life he wanted. At least, that was what Lotus Sun and Kaguya Ryoko thought when they saw this mansion. But when they actually entered the mansion, it was strangely quiet, which was indeed beyond their expectations. As a powerful ascender, Dikas had already begun to lay out his plans for the interior of the imperial city when he was in the slums. It was impossible that this huge mansion didn't even have a single hired servant. "It's a little strange, Rong." In the team voice channel, Kaguya Ryoko couldn't help feeling a little nervous. She tugged at Lotus Sun's cloak and could clearly sense that the atmosphere in the mansion wasn't right. "I can sense Mr. D's aura. He should be in this room in front of us." Lotus Sun led the way at the very front. In fact, she also had an ominous premonition. Relying on the powerful passive perception ability of man and sword as one, Mysterious C was able to identify Dikas' aura in this mansion, but it was very weak. It was completely different from the Dikas they had parted ways with on the road leading to the core area. When they arrived at the core area, their first reaction wasn't to complete Zhu Yuanruan's mission and go after the Black Dragon, but to catch up to Dikas as soon as possible because of what Monk Jin Dang had said, to prevent him from getting into danger. But looking at the current situation, Lotus Sun sensed that they were still a step too slow. Although Dikas had left before them, it had only been less than an hour. "Mr. D," Lotus Sun knocked on the front door of the inner hall. The door wasn't completely locked, and opened easily with a light knock. After Lotus Sun's call, the deathly silent inner hall emitted a strange and soft whimpering sound. The sound was muffled and couldn't be heard at all. If one didn't listen carefully, they wouldn't even be able to detect it. Feeling extremely uneasy, Lotus Sun finally walked up to a wooden wine barrel hidden at the back of the inner hall. And Dikas' aura. It was inside this wooden barrel. Clenching her teeth, Lotus Sun summoned up her courage and lifted the lid of the barrel. A foul stench immediately hit them in the face. It was an extremely complex and rancid smell, like meat products that had gone bad after being marinated for a long time. Lotus Sun and Ryoko Kwamiya were dumbfounded. Because an eyeball was looking at them from inside the barrel. Even though she couldn't tell what Dikas looked like, she could still tell that it was Dikas' eye. "Mr. D." Lotus Sun's eyes instantly turned red, and she tried to use Mysterious C's healing sword Chi to heal him. But it was already useless. Dikas had been killed long before they had arrived. Such a big guy had been chopped into pieces, and put together with the scattered parts in this wine barrel. This is the calamity he deserves. Healing sword Chi can save people, but it has no effect on the dead. Monk Jin Dang sighed. He made a Buddhist salute to the wooden barrel, and the Buddha's light of rebirth had already condensed in his hand. This beam of light could quickly end Dikas' pain and allow him to enter a new cycle of reincarnation. But before this beam of light, Jin Dang seemed to think of something, and he extracted the almost inaudible whimpers from the wooden barrel. They converged into a short string of words. This was the message of death that Dikas had gathered with his obsession before he was killed. There were only 2 words: run. Perhaps it's because we left the address earlier, and he calculated that we would come looking for him. That's why he left this message. Monk Jin Dang sighed. He spread out his Buddha's hand, which was full of glittering golden light and boundless divine power of the Buddhist Dharma. Mr. D, this little monk and the two girls have received your message. Have a safe journey. This little monk has calculated that you will be incomparably happy in your next life. A beam of light of rebirth fell. In the wooden barrel, die-cast turned into golden powder with his last obsession and floated towards the pure land of bliss. After doing all this, he saw the two emotional girls with teary eyes, and hurriedly comforted them. Miss Rong, and Miss Ryoko. Right now, the battle isn't over yet. Keep moving forward. He felt that his words couldn't be said to be comforting. Modern cultivators hadn't experienced too many past wars. But without the peace they were used to enjoying, the true path of cultivation was often much crueler than that of modern cultivation. This was a truth that could only be understood after experiencing it for oneself. Touching upon the cycle of life and death, except for that man, no one had the ability to change the outcome that had already been decided. Senior Jean Dang, I understand. Wiping away the tears at the corners of her eyes, she raised her eyes and scanned the surroundings with her spiritual sense. Come out, all of you. I will return Mr. D's pain to you several times over. As soon as she said that, a powerful sword chi suddenly howled out of Lotus Sun's body. Next to her, Ryoko Kumiya was completely shaken in that one breath. Rong Rong. She felt that Lotus Sun had become a different person, or rather, her previous understanding of Lotus Sun was completely incomplete. The sword chi emanating from her body was too strong. Ryoko Kumiya thought that in all her life, she had only felt this kind of awe once, when she had been fortunate enough to meet that extremely famous blade master in Huashio Nation. And now, the sword chi erupting from Lotus Sun seemed to be even more violent than when she had met Blade Master back then. This was the true fury of a hibiscus. Chapter 1665. More than a dozen chilly auras with boundless coldness twisted indifferently from all directions, and their target was the foyer of the mansion where Lotus Sun was currently. These malevolent spirit energies seemed to be replicas. From their intensity to their smell, they were all exactly the same, which made Lotus Sun immediately determine that these people were very likely to be the new ancient divine weapons that Monk Golden Lamp had mentioned before. Only artificial cultivators with strict standards could have such a consistent sense of harmony. From the aura to the spirit energy to the malice seeping out from within, they were all exactly the same. Kumiya Ryoko was terrified. She was not someone who had never seen such a big scene, but the new ancient divine weapons that surrounded them now, even though they were not the final products that had been finalized, each of them had the combat prowess of a quasi-Dao god. Although they weren't at the level of Black Dragon, there were many of them at the moment, and the accumulated malice had a huge impact on Jimiya Ryoko, a golden core cultivator. Surrounded by so many battle machines with such a huge disparity in realm, Jimiya Ryoko's face immediately turned unsightly. But while she had turned pale, Lotus Sun's face was glowing, and she looked ready to fight. This couldn't help making Jimiya Ryoko feel even more bewildered. Wasn't Lotus Sun just at the Foundation establishment stage? Were all Foundation establishment cultivators so brave now? Because she had already become good friends with Lotus Sun, Jimiya Ryoko didn't feel ashamed, but just a little incredulous. Could it be that Senior Golden Lamp had also blessed Lotus Sun? Jimiya Ryoko thought it over, but the doubt in her heart only grew stronger. After all, Monk Golden Lamp had also blessed her, and she knew what it felt like. It was true that one's body would become stronger after being blessed, but in the face of such a huge gap in realm, the fear of the disparity would still involuntarily surface. When she had been dealing with Black Dragon earlier, Jimiya Ryoko's mind had been filled with the scene of Odd Joie and that pretty boy, Lovey-Dovey. The more she thought about it, the more infuriating it became, and she had no time to think about anything else. But now that they were surrounded by more than a dozen new ancient divine weapons belonging to quasi-Dao gods, the situation had fundamentally changed. Ryoko Kumiya was not stupid. Even though she found it inconceivable, she could sense that the sword chi on Lotus Sun's body wasn't from Monk Jin Dang's illumination, but from her own power. At this time, outside the inner hall, a dozen or so shadows appeared in front of them through the hazy window paper. Each of them was wearing the same black uniform, with a very special black hemp rope tied around their waists and a clown mask on their faces. One of them circled to the roof, his eyes releasing a golden light through the holes of the clown mask. "The Lord requests that we capture this Mr. Gong alive. As for the rest, you can kill them." "Yes." At the same time, a cold and gloomy aura shot toward the inner hall, locking onto Lotus Sun almost at the same time. Lotus Sun's heart suddenly turned cold. Fortunately, she had swapped masks with Kwamiya Ryoko and used Mysterious C's passive ability of becoming one with the sword to simulate Kwamiya Ryoko's aura with the Fata Morgana illusory aura technique, causing this group of people to lock onto her. "Senior Golden Lamp, protect Yoshiko." "I understand." Jin Dang put his palms together, then stepped forward to protect Kwamiya Ryoko behind him. He hadn't organized Lotus Sun's operation because it was a rare opportunity for her to gain experience. As a senior, it was very immoral to fight for experience points with a junior. "Thank you, senior." With Monk Jin Dang providing logistical support, Lotus Sun could act without any scruples. Then she looked at Kwamiya Ryoko and smiled. "Ryoko, I know you have a lot of doubts right now. I'll explain them to you when I get the chance." The situation was urgent, so she only left her with these words. Then she stepped lightly on the ground and soared into the air, breaking through the ceiling with Mysterious C in her hand. Bang! As the rubble was smashed, the girl's figure appeared along with the azure sword Chi. Like a hibiscus rising from the water, her body swirled with the aura of the boundless ocean, forming a sword wave that rushed out in all directions. On the roof, Jin Dang clearly hadn't expected that Mr. Gong would choose to take the initiative to fight in the face of such a siege. When the sword Chi from Lotus Sun came rushing at him, a contemptuous expression appeared on his face, and he wanted to reach out to block it. But when his hand came into contact with this seemingly unremarkable sword wave, Jin Dang was stunned to discover that it wasn't an ordinary wave at all, but a tempestuous wave. The unexpected impact carried with it a tyrannical force that made his right arm go numb on the spot. Jin Dang's reaction was swift and fierce. His brain had been instilled with a large number of combat techniques, and in the face of such an unexpected and fierce attack, even if he was suspected of underestimating his opponent, it wasn't as if he was completely without a way to remedy it. Under these circumstances, meeting force with force would only cause him to lose an arm in vain, so he very cleverly used the thinking concept of Taiji Fist: receive, transform, release. It looked like he was receiving the attack, but in fact, he was using the power of transforming force, a kind of force that could move 1,000 caddies with little effort, so that the fierce force brought by the sword Chi was continuously dispersed from one point in all directions. As long as this force was dispersed, even if his arm was hit by the attack, it wouldn't completely break. Finally, with the sound of bones dislocating, Jin Dang took a step back. Using the combat techniques instilled in his brain, he resisted the trouble caused by underestimating his opponent. In the end, the price he had to pay was just a dislocation. Like most new mystical weapons, they didn't feel pain, so a dislocation didn't seem to affect them at all. With a calm expression, he used his left arm to help twist it, and the right arm was reattached. This person's reaction is very fast. Faced with Jin Dang's swift and fierce reaction, Lotus Sun was amazed after this test move. It's not that his reaction is fast. All the combat experience of a new ancient divine weapon is the same. They're like calculators that can quickly find a way to deal with different moves in the database, Sun Yinger analyzed in Lotus Sun's mind at that moment. So that's how it is. Lotus Sun nodded. She tightened her grip on Mysterious C's arm, a confident expression on her face. If her opponent was fighting her according to a preset program, then the following battle would be very easy. In Lotus Sun's view, the following battle would be very easy to handle. After all, a computer program was still inputted by humans. Even if it had the ability to learn autonomously, if it encountered a problem that didn't appear in the program, it would be difficult for it to react immediately. As the #1 foundation establishment cultivator on Earth, Lotus Sun's logical thinking was extremely clear. Mysterious C, lend me a hand. She called out to mysterious sea in her heart and gradually began to unseal this passive ability of becoming one with the sword. When the aura of the Heavenly Tao magic cube was slowly released from mysterious sea's azure blade, Jin Deng's expression froze once more. Heavenly Tao magic cube? There was actually such a thing? At this moment, he suddenly understood why this girl's sword chi could be so fierce. It was just a Heavenly Tao magic cube. As long as he was careful, he should be able to smoothly complete his plan to capture her alive. But what Jin Deng hadn't expected at all was, after Lotus Sun unsealed the power of the first Heavenly Tao magic cube, this aura actually continued to soar, so there are two magic cubes. Jin Deng couldn't help sweating at his temples. Then, the beads of sweat grew denser and denser, almost as if it was raining down, because the number of Heavenly Tao magic cubes he sensed wasn't just two, there seemed to be more. A few seconds later, Jin Shue's brain had almost stopped working. Before accepting this mission, he had been full of confidence. But now, no matter how unwilling he was to admit it, he had to admit that he was already a little flustered. After all, before this mission, no one had told him that a spirit sword could actually fuse 6 Heavenly Tao magic cubes into it. For Jin Deng, this problem was already a little out of his league. He even had the same question as Kwame or Yoko in his mind. Were all Foundation establishment cultivators these days so brave? Chapter 1666. Inside the mysterious sea, the divine power of the 6 Heavenly Tao magic cubes was working together, and the superimposed power formed a sword pressure that could be described as crushing, which was unimaginably shocking. It was true that Wang Ling now had the remaining 3 cubes of Tao ancestor Wang's primordial Rubik's Cube, which meant that it was only a matter of time before the mysterious sea would become a genuine, 9-cores spirit sword. But even with 3 missing, the pressure was still enough to make one's hair stand on end. How could this be? Led by Jinan, the leader of this group of new ancient divine weapons, everyone was dumbstruck for a moment, their eyes wide and round, very much like the scene in the first episode of The Deer and the Cauldron when Wei Xiaobao was telling the story. How could a girl who was only at the Foundation establishment stage be able to control this spirit sword that had been fused with 6 Heavenly Tao magic cubes? At that moment, Jinan realized that his memory was starting to go haywire, because his mind was blank and he couldn't think of a way to deal with this situation at all. The girl with the 6 cores mysterious sea was too powerful. Just by standing there, her body emitted a tsunami of sword pressure, which was as powerful as the end of the world. All of them froze in place and couldn't move a muscle. This was also the first time that Lotus Sun had fully revealed her strongest battle strength in front of outsiders. She hadn't reached such an outrageous level when she had beheaded Old God with her sword earlier, but she was clearly stronger now. No one could have imagined that a Foundation establishment cultivator would actually be able to use a spirit sword to boost her battle strength to the level of a monster. That was right. At that moment, in the eyes of these new ancient divine weapons led by Jinan, Lotus Sun was an out-and-out monster. This couldn't go on, they had to think of a way. Watching Lotus Sun approach him step by step, Jinan began to forcibly control his body, which had been stiffened by the sword pressure. At the same time, the new ancient divine weapons below him, who could also be called androids, did the same thing. They were too close to Lotus Sun to be able to move, so they could only forcibly remove their rigidity and then put as much distance between them as possible. But this was a ridiculous and face-slapping action. Because before coming here, Jinan had thought that this would be an extremely easy task. Even though this Mr. Gong was very strong, they had the advantage in numbers. It was not impossible for them to subdue him and bring him back to that lord alive and unharmed. But now, Jin too felt that the situation had completely changed. Listen to my command, set up the formation. As long as he could ensure that Gong Xianxing was alive. Even if he broke his limbs and crippled him. As long as he's alive, we don't need to think about anything else, Jinan ordered. This was an act of helplessness. Originally, they wanted to bring Mr. Gong, alive and unscathed to Na Wei. But now, it was clearly impossible. This was a battle where they had to give it their all. The necessary casualties were unavoidable. Hardly had Jean too concluded his sentence when more than 10 golden arrows of spiritual energy darted out of the holes and cut apart the space like waves, plowing black cracks in the void that the arrows passed through. This was the battle prowess of a quasi-Dao god, and tearing apart space was a common occurrence. These golden arrows flashed through the void at a speed invisible to the naked eye with terrifying power. Dragging along hideous spatial cracks, they were poignant yet gorgeous as they shot toward Lotus Sun from multiple directions. If these powerful spiritual energy arrows collided with the roof, the huge explosion would instantly raze the mansion to the ground. Lotus Sun stood on the roof. Mysterious C's sword chi had already completely covered the entire imperial city, and she could clearly sense the positions of these dozen androids, including the barrier that they had deliberately set up around the mansion before coming here. This was to prevent accidents like this from happening when they attacked, and the impact of the explosion would spread elsewhere. But this was actually helping Lotus Sunday. She stood solemnly in place. With Mysterious C's sword chi protecting her body and the eternal illumination spell that monk Jin Deng had cast on her during the Yin and Yang death calamity incident, the strength of her body had reached an incredible level. Buzz! Mysterious C's protective sword chi was automatically released, forming an eggshell-shaped sword barrier with a radius of 8 feet. These golden arrows that came from all directions couldn't even break through the sword barrier in the end. When they were within 8 feet of Lotus Sun, it was as if time had stopped and they were frozen in the air, unable to move forward even half a step. And then, a horrifying scene occurred. These golden arrows with tremendous energy were actually swallowed up by Lotus Sun's protective sword chi. Like a clay ox falling into the sea, they fell into the boundless and deep ocean, and were quickly submerged without a trace. At this moment, Jinan's mind went blank once again. He looked at Lotus Sun's emotionless face, and as he was shaken by this sight, he also sensed the girl's gaze. It was a kind of contempt that completely looked down on them. "Looks like it's my turn now," the girl said. At this moment, Mysterious C's sword was already filled with a mysterious azure color. It was sparkling and translucent, and it was incomparably brilliant. It had the depth of the boundless ocean, and at the same time, it was exuding a boundless aura of life. Devastatingly beautiful sword. She spoke indifferently, and with an extremely graceful and beautiful body, she brandished the azure sword and drew a circle around herself. The last time she had used this powerful devastatingly beautiful sword was when Mysterious C and Bai Qiao had fused together. But now, because Mysterious C had 6 heavenly Dao magic cubes, this devastatingly beautiful sword had already become her most common skill. The only difference was that last time, it had been a straight slash. She had slashed out sword chi over 10,000 meters. But this time, it was a circular sword chi that slashed out around her. It was like a gorgeous waltz, and the moment it was unleashed, it made people's scalps go numb. Of course, she had even more powerful moves, such as the devastatingly beautiful sword or the devastatingly beautiful sword, but if she used these 2 more powerful moves now, Lotus Sun was a little worried that the barrier that these people had set up around the mansion would be directly shattered by her move, and the innocent residents would be affected. Rumble. The circular sword chi of the devastatingly beautiful sword rushed out, carrying with it a supersonic sound wave that even a Dao god's hearing couldn't hear as it slashed out in all directions. The 16 androids, including Jean too, looked horrified. For each and every one of them, this was completely out of their league. It wasn't something they could deal with. Even their battle strength wasn't on the same level. Although they were androids that had been created and were just tools to follow orders, they also cherished their lives. After realizing that they had completely underestimated this, Mr. Gong's battle strength, everyone's first thought was to retreat. But Mysterious C's sword chi was really too fast. It swept out in all directions, sweeping away 1,000 enemies. Just as the 16 androids were about to retreat, their line of sight suddenly tilted. It turned out that their heads had already been separated from their bodies, 16 quasi-Dao God level heads. In that instant, they all fell to the ground. And the one with the Buddha's light over there. You monks are not compassionate. To deliver all living beings from suffering? Jean Deng looked up at Jean Nu and said, "Those with souls are living beings. You don't even have souls, so what kind of living beings are you?" These words caused Jean N to be speechless. They thought they were humans, but in reality, they were just machines with a certain level of artificial intelligence created by Na Wei. Was it sad? Maybe a little bit, that was what she thought. At that moment, Monk Jean Deng's heart was also in turmoil. He felt that Lotus Sun had always been a kind girl, but when it came to major issues, she was more clear about gratitude and grudges than he had imagined, and had the air of a chivalrous woman. This made him a little happy, and he felt that Lotus Sun had really matured a lot. Rong, what on earth? At that moment, the only person at the scene who was dumbfounded was Jamier Yoko. She felt like she was on the verge of breaking down. She couldn't understand why Lotus Sun had suddenly become so strong, and so ridiculously strong. "Ryoko, I didn't mean to hide it from you." "So did Senior Audjua. I've always told him not to tell you. Anyway, this is a good opportunity, so why don't we let him explain it to you?" Lotus Sun took Jamier Yoko's hand and said. She then looked outside the hall. "Senior Audjua, you're here, right? Don't hide outside, I sensed you a long time ago." Audjua, who was hiding underground by a haystack outside the house, couldn't help sighing. What was meant to come would always come, because Jamier Yoko had always thought that Wang Ling was her disciple. He felt that this wonderful misunderstanding was actually pretty good. At the very least, it could help explain a lot of things. Of course, Audjua was also well aware that the truth couldn't be hidden forever. He and Jamier Yoko had already established their relationship, and they planned to continue this path in the future, so he had to take this step in the end. Even though he was a little surprised by the way things had developed, but now, Audjua felt that it was time for him to act like a man and explain everything to Jamier Yoko. On the other side a few minutes ago, Wang Ling was playing with a gold coin bulldozer in the game hall of the Imperial City. He was holding a coin, and his hands suddenly paused in the air. He could sense the fluctuations of sword chi from Lotus Sun's alluring sword. It seemed that a fight had already broken out over there. Furthermore, it was a crushing blow. Wang Ling didn't know why he had suddenly paid attention to the situation over there while he was playing the game. But after learning that Lotus Sun's side was progressing smoothly, he felt a lot more at ease, and then turned his attention back to the gold coin bulldozer in front of him. This was already the 16th gold coin bulldozer that Wang Ling had emptied. The game coins that Wang Ling had earned were piled up into 3 full sacks. There were as many as 100,000 of them. According to the game hall's calculations, these 100,000 game coins could all be converted into gold gear coins at a 1:10 exchange rate. There were actually quite a few throwing techniques for playing the gold coin bulldozer, and Wang Ling's technique was to attach a magnetic force to the coin that was being thrown as he threw it. As a result, as soon as the coin entered the bulldozer, no matter where it was, it would immediately form an avalanche and push all the game coins out of the bulldozer. "Mr. Jean, do you still want to continue? The first few machines that have been emptied have already been filled with new game coins." The person in charge of the game hall wiped his cold sweat and stood respectfully next to Wang Ling. His immediate superior was Jia Bugue. Usually, whenever Wang Ling appeared in the game hall, Jia Bugue would tremble in fear and reprimand them for using all sorts of methods to get rid of Wang Ling. Like the owners of other video game halls, almost all of them who had been robbed by Wang Ling suffered from a disease that made them twitch uncontrollably at the sight of Wang Ling, commonly known as the godly Jinshin disease. The person in charge had thought that Jia Bugue's attitude would be the same as before. But who knew that when he went to report today, Boss Jia seemed to be in an exceptionally good mood. Not only did he not stop him, he even sent someone to play with this Mr. Jean to his heart's content. The most outrageous thing was that this play had no limits. Jia Bugue had already given him an order. Even if Wang Ling swept away all the game coins in his game hall today, even if the game hall directly closed down and lost everything, he would still play with him. When the person in charge of the game hall heard this, he was dumbfounded on the spot. "Boss, are you serious?" Just a few minutes ago on the phone, he confirmed with Jia Bugue again. Little did he know that Jia Bugue, who had picked up the phone, said righteously, "Of course I'm serious. After all, This was his little brother's birthday. If his little brother wanted to play, of course he would play with him. In any case, even if the game hall closed down, it wasn't his money that was being spent. Chapter 1668. When the news of the death of the 16 neo-ancient mystical armaments, led by Gene 2, was transmitted to Na Wei's brain through the mental connection hub, he felt a slight tingling sensation. This tingling sensation had no effect on the body itself, and it merely expressed a signal that the mental connection hub had been completely disconnected. This meant that the 16 quasi-Dao God neo-ancient mystical armaments, led by Gene 2, were completely hopeless. The material of the neo-ancient mystical armaments was very special, and it had the ability to regenerate. Under normal circumstances, even if it was severely damaged, it could still be salvaged. Even if a part of its body was lost and its regenerative ability was restricted, as long as there was more than 30% of its mechanical tissue left, it could still survive. In other words, as long as there was at least 30% of its mechanical tissue left, it would not be to the point where the mental connection hub was directly disconnected. Na Wei's face was filled with disbelief. He did not expect that the combined combat power of Gene 2 and the others he had sent would not be able to defeat that Gong. However, this made him feel even more excited. This proved that his judgment was right. This Mr. Gong was indeed a good material for him to further realize the ultimate version, neo-ancient mystical armament. Of course, the defeat of Gene 2 and the others also made Na Wei reflect. He felt that in terms of battle prowess, Gene 2 and the others should not be crushed. Perhaps it had something to do with the order he had given them at the beginning, to bring back Mr. Gong alive. It caused Gene 2 and the others to be restrained when they made their move, allowing the other party to find an opportunity. From the looks of it, there seemed to be no need to be restrained anymore. Back then, his master, the Heartless Patriarch, was an existence that was worshipped as the underworld soul chaser. Even a dead person could be saved within 48 hours with his uncanny mechanical parts. Of course, it would be best if he could be captured alive, as that would save Na Wei a lot of trouble. However, there was no need for that now. Pass down my order. At this moment, Na Wei pondered for a moment and said to the spherical guards in front of him, "I want to release the containment device." This order stunned the ball-shaped guards, because this was a very dangerous move. They needed Na Wei to give another order to confirm the procedure. A spherical guard issued a warning with an electronic voice, "Release containment command detected." This command may lead to unpredictable danger. The containment creatures are currently in an uncontrollable state. Under this castle, there were countless strange creatures that had been taken in. In order to conduct experiments on the ancient divine weapon, the Wuxin clan patriarch had forcefully imprisoned them in a specific Rubik's Cube container. They were strange, powerful, and had certain weaknesses, but they could not be completely killed, I know. Na Wei smiled and said, "There has been no way to deal with these guys effectively. Mr. Na Wei Gong is so strong, so he must have a way to deal with them, right? Borrow his hand to make those living beings consume a portion of their physical strength, and at the same time, wear down his own strength. In the end, send out the new neo-ancient divine armaments to surround him, and he will definitely be brought to me." At this point, the spherical guards already knew what Na Wei wanted to do. It was nothing more than exhausting each other's physical strength, and in the end, reaping the benefits of a third party. However, it was hard to say whether it would be so smooth in practice. This was because the abilities of those creatures were strange and abnormally cruel. Not only were they not easy to control, they could easily harm innocent people. However, Na Wei seemed to be particularly confident about this. "It's fine. That Mr. Gong seems to be a warm-hearted person. To deal with such a warm-hearted person, it would be more interesting to leave these uncertain factors in the past. Even if something really happens to someone, at most, we'll just lose money. For the future development of the Imperial City, sometimes necessary sacrifices are needed. Then how do you want to release the creatures? Directly use the teleportation technique to send the Rubik's Cube that is used to contain them over. Of course, set up the automatic release program before sending it over." Understood. At this moment, the spherical guard's light flickered, and immediately projected the light from its mechanical eyes. Accompanied by the constantly jumping numbers in the void, a series of information about the creatures and the corresponding containment number were clearly projected in the void. The spherical guard said, "Sir, please choose which of the creatures to release first." Na Wei rubbed his chin and chuckled. SCP-096, let's activate it for now. SCP-096 was an ancient Dao God realm creature, and its current realm strength had reached the quasi-Dao ancestor realm. This was a strange fellow that his Shifu, the heartless ancestor, had captured on the back of the moon in ancient times. It was a rabbit in human form, but because it had a pair of rabbit buck teeth, it had a strong sense of inferiority. It usually covered its mouth, only revealing those beautiful ruby-like eyes. It looked like a gentle, refined, and extremely gentlemanly creature, but when it got violent, it wouldn't even recognize its own family. None of those who had seen its buck teeth had survived. Back then, Na Wei had come into contact with SCP-096 a lot in order to study the structure of the ancient divine weapon's teeth. SCP-096 had almost killed him several times by using its buck teeth to bite through his throat. Now that he had released SCP-096 again, Na Wei had to admit that it actually felt a little like he was abusing his position to avenge a personal grudge. Are you sure you want to release the creatures contained in SCP-096, also known as Material Pack Number 096? Yes. Very well, the system understands. After a countdown of 120 seconds, it will be transported to the designated coordinates. In the game hall, Wang Ling emptied the last gold coin bulldozer, and was perfectly satisfied as he used the 200,000 game coins he had just won to exchange for 20,000 gold gear coins. He wasn't an insatiable person, and from the very beginning, he hadn't intended to use up all of the game hall's capital. He just needed to save enough money to buy crispy noodle snacks. Take care, Lord Jean. With tears in his eyes, the person in charge of the game hall respectfully sent Wang Ling off with his workers at the door. With a wave of his sleeve, he was deeply moved by Wang Ling's leniency, and even welcomed him to come again next time. Wang Ling was very satisfied with this. He felt that this game hall had a lot of future prospects. As one of his ATMs in this world, Wang Ling felt that as long as the Imperial City continued to operate, places like the game hall had to be preserved. Of course, he wouldn't just fleece one place. If the sheep went bald, he wouldn't be able to make any money. The Wang family's teachings had always told him that he couldn't use his abilities to make money in the real world. Wang Ling naturally remembered this family teaching. But the place he was in now was not the real world, but an alternate world. Thus, this couldn't be considered a violation. He was about to go to the snack store that Xiang Yi had opened in this other world to buy crispy noodle snacks. Just as he was less than 500 meters from the entrance of the snack store, there was suddenly an earth-shattering noise. An 8-meter-long and 8-meter-wide cube fell from the sky like a meteor from a strange angle, smashing the snack store into smithereens on the spot. Wang Ling had seen this scene before. Just 7 years ago, it had been the same scene when the gate between worlds had descended. In the end, it had happened just as he was buying snacks. Chapter 1669. When the huge cube with a metallic luster and full of technological feeling appeared on the streets of the downtown area, the spherical guardian immediately issued an abnormal warning. Because there was a difference between the location it was sent to and the actual location it appeared in, this shouldn't have happened. What the hell is going on? Na Wei frowned in displeasure. He had wanted to send the cube precisely in front of Lotus Sun and the others, but he hadn't expected it to be sent directly to the downtown area. Now the situation had become troublesome, and it looked like a lot of people were going to die. Abnormal energy fluctuations of SCP-096 detected. Initial suspicion is that the containment device gave 096 a certain amount of spiritual energy space after leaving the suppression array, allowing it to use its own ability to teleport the entire cube to another location, resulting in a deviation in coordinates. Sure enough, it's become stronger. Na Wei rubbed his chin and sneered. No matter, let's not worry about it for now. Just release another containment creature that doesn't have the ability to teleport in front of Mr. Gong. Release another one? I think SCB-1212 isn't bad, Na Wei said. SCB-1212, Chinese name, mute. Ability analysis, will launch a sudden attack on all objects that make a sound within its hearing range, using its sharp claws to slit open its stomach. It is a strange humanoid creature with mantis hands and a bloody mouth full of sharp teeth on its head. Just looking at it gives off a strong sense of oppression. All people who come into direct contact with it will involuntarily make sounds of ABA ABA. Even the words ABA ABA will constantly appear in their minds, making it impossible for them to think. Whenever someone hears the word ABA 100 times in its vicinity, it will automatically obtain a life and revive immediately after death. According to Na Wei's understanding of SCB-1212, it had accumulated at least 1,260,000 lives over the years. In other words, it would have to be killed at least 1,260,000 times before it would be completely destroyed. Na Wei couldn't wait to see what kind of chemical reaction would occur when this Mr. Gong met 1212. Moreover, there was a certain chance that 1212 would meet 096 this time. In the previous experiments with containment creatures, these two had never met face to face. If they were to fight, it might provide a breakthrough academic contribution to his research on the ultimate version of the neo-archaic mystical weapon. At this moment, the spherical guardian issued another confirmation command. Are you sure you want to liberate the host of SCB-1212, also known as Source Pack 1212? I'm sure. Alright, the system understands. We will be teleported to the designated coordinates in 120 seconds. On the other side, when a huge cube with a metallic luster and a strong sense of technology appeared on the streets of the downtown area, Wang Ling and little girl Nguan, who had been lying on his shoulder all this time, immediately sensed the strange creature inside the cube. At the scene, the debris caused by the collapse of the building splashed in all directions, raising a large amount of dust. At the same time, the terrified voices of passers-by could be heard. Everyone fled, completely unaware of the situation. Hands in his pockets, Wang Ling trembled slightly as he stood in front of the collapsed snack shop. Now, he finally understood what the internet meant by shivering with anger. The flying debris didn't hit Wang Ling, who was protected by a powerful holy light. This was an ability that came with his sage body, which could be activated automatically when he was unconscious and could block all flying spells or props that got close to him. Although Wang Nguan's body was also strong, it wasn't as strong as Wang Ling's. Worried that little girl Nguan would be hurt, he expanded the holy light around him to envelop her as well. The brother and sister pair worked well together. Wang Ling was completely focused on little girl Nguan, who used the power of her shadow Dao to control all the flying debris and prevent it from hurting nearby innocent passers-by. What on earth is going on outside? The snack shop they were in wasn't far from the astrology club. When he saw the huge cube land, grenade-throwing senior Immortal frowned deeply. Danger. This cube was very dangerous. Although he didn't know what on earth was inside, based on his years of courting death, the creature sealed inside this cube definitely wasn't something from the mundane world. It's a shelter, Xiang Yi said at that moment. He had already unzipped his sniper rifle pouch and was rapidly assembling the Nine Yang Divine Sword, according to my investigation, in order to nurture a top-notch new ancient divine weapon. According to my investigation, the Heartless Patriarch had a habit of capturing strange extraterrestrial creatures back then. Each of these creatures had unique skills, and couldn't be killed so easily using ordinary cultivation methods. Therefore, they can only be imprisoned in this kind of cubic sealing container in this form of seal. Then what on earth are they? It doesn't feel like they're divine beasts born from chaos. Loopy Toad frowned. Ever since it had learned about the existence of that divine marmot back then, Loopy Toad himself had evolved into a divine beast. If the creature in the cube was also a divine beast born from chaos, or had evolved to that level in the later stages, it would definitely resonate with Loopy Toad. But now, this resonance was almost zero. Divine beasts aren't the only creatures born from chaos. There's also a certain chance that alien beasts of chaos will be born. These alien beasts of chaos are also called indescribable creatures. Indescribable creatures? Are these creatures related to the outer gods and the great old ones? Perhaps. That's all I know at the moment. At the very least, there are some indescribable creatures related to the great old ones and the outer gods. As for the others, they're just creatures born from a mixture of great Tao and the power of chaos, said Xiang Yi. I see. Loopy Toad nodded. He more or less understood. That was to say, the unified name for these creatures was indescribable creatures, but they were divided into two factions. One faction was the Great Old Days faction, which was born from the combination of chaos and some of the outer gods and the cells of the great old ones. The other faction was the Great Tao faction, which was born from the combination of the power of the great Tao and chaos. At that moment, the nine-yang divine sword in his hand had already been completely assembled. He adjusted the 3.2 billion light-year scope on the sword and nodded with satisfaction. To avoid harming the innocent, it's better to kill these alien beasts of chaos as soon as possible. No need. With that person here, this guy shouldn't be able to jump around for long. At that moment, Wang Ming stretched out his hand to stop Xiang Yi from trying to perform a headshot. Xiang Yi, who's here? Wang Ming smiled. Who else could it be? Loopy Toad was alarmed. Could it be Lord F***K? I was wondering why I kept feeling his aura up ahead. It wasn't because I missed him so much that I was hallucinating. Actually, he had wanted to say earlier whether Wang Ling had also come to this alternate world, but he hadn't been very sure. It wasn't until he saw this incomparably familiar scene in front of him that he had the answer in his heart. 7 years ago, he had also crushed a small store, and then by a freak combination of factors, he had turned from a toad into a dog. Who knew what would happen to this rabbit man who had also crushed a small store? At that moment, everyone in Battle's sect in the astrology club was paying close attention to the battle in front of them. They saw Wang Ling slowly walk toward the rabbit that had already escaped the containment container. Loopy Toad rubbed its nose. Why do I smell unwanted scent on Lord? It was sure that it hadn't smelled wrong. The baby's milk scent was still very obvious. Little girl Nuan is indeed here, on his shoulder, said Wang Ming. So she's Ling Zhenren's little sister? She's too small, won't she be in danger? Xiang Yi was a little worried. He knew who Wang Ling was, but didn't know anything about Wang Nuan. In his original world, he and Wang Nuan hadn't interacted at all. Judging from its appearance, this should be the rabbit man from 091. It has an extremely strong self-healing ability, and will kill anyone who sees its buck teeth, Xiang Yi added. As soon as he said that, a scene that no one had expected happened. Suddenly, little girl Nuan shouted, "Rabbit! Bunny!" Then, he jumped off Wang Ling's shoulder and flew toward the rabbit man. Faced with Wang Nuan flying toward it, the rabbit man was also caught off guard. It had been born on the far side of the moon 4 billion years ago, and had never seen such a daring human, and there was actually a baby among them? A look of disbelief and fear appeared in 091's eyes. When Wang Nuan's breath neared him, bringing with it the scent of milk as she rode on his neck, 091's mind was suddenly shaken to a halt. This familiar feeling, at that moment, 091's beautiful ruby-like eyes were filled with tears. Master. 091 let go of the hand that had been covering its buck teeth due to its suicide, and spoke faintly with tears in its eyes. Wang Ling had wanted to kill 091 with a karate chop. In the end, when he saw this scene, he instantly felt relieved. Because 4 billion years ago, he had indeed used the great Tao ability of Shadow Tao in the Heavens at a Cliff of the Palm. Thus, the birth of 091 was also related to him. Because he had used Shadow Tao in advance back then. It had caused Wang Nuan's Shadow Tao to react with chaos. And on the far side of the moon, 091 was born. Chapter 1670. When the rabbit codenamed 096 revealed a moved expression with tears in its eyes, Wang Nuan also spoke. The white and soft fur on the rabbit's body climbed all the way up to her shoulders, and she used her small hands to pull 096's ears as if she was pulling on a rein. 096 didn't feel the slightest bit of pain from this tugging. Instead, it felt very comfortable. It had waited for 4 billion years to find the value and meaning of its existence. Even if it had never seen Wang Wan before, its ability to resonate with the master of Shadow Dao wasn't fake. 096 quickly realized that the baby riding on its shoulders and tugging on its ears was the master it had been searching for all this time, and the meaning of its existence in this world. And so, at that very moment, 096, who had never smiled and had always been one-sidedly silent in sorrow, suddenly revealed its buck teeth confidently and smiled like never before. When Xiang Yi saw this scene in the astrology club, he was completely stupefied. That wasn't right. Weren't these hosts supposed to be savage and inhumane monsters? Why were they smiling as if they had seen Ku Xian's birthday? There was clearly something wrong with this scene. It could only be said that, as expected of Ling Jinren's little sister, after sharing the same bloodline, there were always things that exceeded common sense. Very quickly, Xiang Yi began to feel at ease, and felt that he had been a little too inexperienced. Grenade-throwing senior immortal. So, this 096 is from the Great Dao School? A creature born of Shadow Dao? Loopy Toad sweated. That seems to be the case. This rabbit's aura is very strong. I didn't expect it to actually be one of us. This result was also beyond Wang Ling's expectations. The seed that had been sown 4 billion years ago had only now been reclaimed. After witnessing all the changes in the world, Wang Ling was actually a little moved when he carefully savored it, and couldn't help but cry at this point. When he saw An Wan playing with the rabbit's ear happily, his heart softened. Although the rabbit had crushed his snack stand and interrupted his plan to buy snacks, An Wan's heart softened. Although this rabbit had crushed his snack stand and disrupted his plan to buy snacks, as long as little girl An Wan liked it, it was the same as picking up a death exemption gold medal. After all, this was his little sister, and his own little sister at that. What could he do? Since his little sister liked it, he could only spoil her. Of course. If one day Wang Wan lost interest in 096, 096's life would be in danger. Maybe he would be turned into a spicy rabbit head. Wang Ling could see that 096 was very strong. Although it had lived for 4 billion years, the truth was that a considerable part of that time had been spent in the containment facility. In other words, the meat wasn't as old as it looked, and it wouldn't taste bad when cooked. Just as Wang Ling was pondering whether to make 096 into a dish in the future, whether he should braise it, steam it, or make it spicy, 096, which had been exceptionally obedient as An Wan held its 2 rabbit ears, suddenly turned in one direction with an ominous glint in its eyes and a look of extreme hostility. Is there another one? Wang Ling mumbled in his heart. Not far away, a new cubic containment vessel descended along with a deafening roar. 096 was giving out a low warning growl in that direction. At the same time, Nwan did indeed search the fluffy fur on its head. In an instant, it felt as if its bones had gone limp, causing 096's body to soften. Another one? Loopy Toad said warily in the astrology club. It didn't know if it was an illusion, but it felt that the containment vessel in this cube was more ferocious than 096. From the looks of it, it should be 1212, Xiang Yi said with a frown. Of all the containment vessels that the heartless patriarch had captured, 1212 was clearly one of the younger generation, but because of its special abilities, it was also an existence that couldn't be underestimated. Don't panic. With Senior Golden Lamp there, I don't think anything will happen. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was unperturbed. So far, the mastermind behind the scenes of Imperial City hadn't made a move, and instead had released this dangerous containment vessel as the vanguard. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal couldn't help feeling that there was a hidden danger inside. We can't blindly adopt a defensive posture. Are there any brothers willing to go directly to the castle with me to take a look? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal said after thinking for a long time. I agree with Senior Immortal. At that moment, Loopy Toad took the initiative to step forward. Then Senior Immortal and this Elder Toad will go to the castle, and Mr. Ming and I will provide long-range support. As Xiang Yi spoke, he stroked the 9-yang divine sword, which had just been assembled. Have you chosen a sniping spot? Wang Ming asked Xiang Yi. No need, just here is fine. But shouldn't a sniper choose the best angle to shoot from? In theory, that's right, but I don't use the 9-yang divine sword. Not only can I see through things, my bullets can also turn. On the other side, at the location of Daikas's mansion, along with the landing of a huge cube, a humanoid monster covered in black hair with an indistinct face slowly stepped out of the containment device. It was almost an instinctive reaction, and Odd Zhua immediately shielded Kyuya Ryoko behind him. He had wanted to tell Kyuya Ryoko the truth, but hadn't expected danger to descend once again at this critical juncture. Ryoko, I'm sorry. Let's solve the problem in front of us first, okay? I'll tell you everything after that, Odd Zhua said. Hearing this, Kyuya Ryoko's expression didn't change, but at least it was a lot more relaxed than before, because Odd Zhua instinctively shielded her behind him. In terms of boyfriend power, this was a plus. It was just that because of her hostility toward Qin Zong, Kyuya Ryoko's expression didn't change much. Of course, Qin Zong could also see that Kyuya Ryoko misunderstood him, but this wasn't the time to explain things. Wang Mingdo's voice rang out in Odd Zhua and the others' minds almost at the same time as 1212's descent, and they immediately understood what was going on. Looks like it's still coming for me. Lotus Sun sighed. Judging from the information Wang Ming had shared, this containment creature clearly wasn't easy to deal with, and was a very troublesome one. At that moment, 1212's massive body was outlined in a cloud of smoke, and it gave off an unusually dangerous aura. Leave it to me, Ryoko. Odd Zhua grit his teeth and walked forward with his gun. Brother Zhua, be careful, Qin Zong reminded him from the side. In the end, no one had expected that his warning would cause Kyuya Ryoko to explode. Her mood had just eased a little when Qin Zong provoked her again. She stomped her foot in anger and roared at him, You pervert who likes men. I've put up with you for a long time. Qin Zong, ? As soon as he said that, Kyuya Ryoko rushed forward and tried to slap Qin Zong. Sister-in-law, calm down. Brother Qin isn't like what you think. Zhou Zi reacted quickly in this situation. His peacemaker nature made him instinctively want to step forward to stop her, but Kyuya Ryoko's slap just so happened to land on his back. And then, there was no then. Since the effect of Kyuya Ryoko's blessing hadn't ended, this slap was extremely powerful, and it actually became a huge boost on the spot. There was a loud bang. A firm slap landed on Zhou Zi's back, causing him to instantly transform into an advanced humanoid missile. Then, he turned into a beam of light and shot forward. He shot forward with the indestructible physical strength of his 5-piece long johns, which looked like Michelin tires. He crashed headfirst into 1212 in the smoke. Chapter 1671. The development of things was beyond everyone's expectations, or rather, the effect of Jamiya Ryoko's slap was beyond everyone's expectations. Due to the effect of Monk Jin Deng's enlightening technique, Jamiya Ryoko's attributes in all aspects had exceeded her realm. It could be said that she had ascended to a higher level. This slap was a slap blessed by the most holy Buddhist teachings, and it was extremely powerful. It was enough to physically transcend all people under the progenitor realm. However, when this slap hit Zhou Zi, who was wearing 5 layers of long johns, this directly produced a very magical scientific physical reaction. That was, the effect of force was mutual. When this powerful slap fell on Zhou Zi's back, because the effect of force is mutual, the power of the long johns immediately released a backlash power that quickly fell on Jamiya Ryoko's slap. But because the effect of force is mutual, when the backlash power hit the slap, it produced a new backlash power. Then, because the effect of force is mutual, the new backlash power transmitted by Jamiya Ryoko fell on the long johns again, and so on, over and over again. Just a few seconds after Jamiya Ryoko came into contact with Zhou Zi, due to the interaction of force, the backlash power repeatedly jumped back and forth, directly forming an explosive propelling force. At that moment, Zhou Zi appeared out of nowhere. Let him turn into light. In an instant, Zhou Zi, who had shot out, hit 1212's abdomen on the spot, pushing forward with a destructive force. At the moment of impact, 1212's soul shook violently. Although his reaction was very fast, almost at the moment when Zhou Zi's head hammered down, he reached out his hand to try to resist Zhou Zi's impact. However, he never thought that a Foundation establishment cultivator would have such powerful destructive power. His two arms melted on the spot the moment they came into contact with each other. Zhou Zi's entire body was surging with the recoil of the long johns, the crimson recoil force, and the Buddhist holy light produced by the influence of the light consecration spell. These two forces did not cancel each other out because of their mutual influence, but instead became stronger and stronger under the influence of each other. The sudden surprise made 1212 lose his left and right arms in an instant. The holy Buddhist light was like two bundles of whips, drilling into 1212's body through the wounds the moment his arms collapsed. This kind of destructive and lethal power could no longer be stopped. 1212 gritted his teeth. He did not expect to be targeted as soon as he was revived. His life was definitely not going to be spared. Therefore, he could only think of a way to stop Zhou Zi during the last moments of his life. Damn it, these wretched cultivators must die. As the representative of the Great Old Era faction of the indescribable creatures, at this moment, 1212's hatred for everyone had almost reached its limit. It swore in its heart that it would kill all these human scum in the cruelest way possible. It wanted this group of people to live and suffer the greatest pain. It wanted them to clearly see their stomachs being cut open and their intestines being torn apart bit by bit. Then, it would devour them until nothing was left. In the last moments of its life, 1212 used its own power of hatred to detonate itself, using the huge explosion impact to force Zhou Zi to stop his human missile behavior. As for himself, he had been smashed into pieces. However, 1212 did not die just like that. It had at least 1,200,000 lives. Forget being blown to pieces, even if it was reduced to ashes, it could quickly come back to life. His body finally came to a stop. Zhou Zi rubbed his head. He had no idea what had happened, and only felt that he had moved a very long distance after receiving Kamiya Ryoko's slap. When his body finally came to a stop, he was completely unscathed, except for a little bit of smoke caused by the tremendous air friction. A small team led by Odd Zhua and Lotus Sun quickly arrived. Seeing that 1212 had been turned into cannon fodder by Zhou Zi as soon as it appeared, Odd Zhua grinned from ear to ear. Not bad. Little Wingzy. You did a meritorious deed. Well done. Odd Zhua had originally brought Zhou Zi to the illusory land of nothingness with the intention of helping Zhou Zi do a meritorious deed, but he hadn't expected his wish to be fulfilled so quickly. On the other hand, Zhou Zi was still in a state of confusion. He had no idea what was going on. Kamiya Ryoko had an apologetic expression on her face. Given her usual temperament, she was never someone who would apologize right away, and would definitely use that roundabout way to express her apologies. But just now, she realized that she had really been wrong. Z, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hit you, Kamiya Ryoko said as she bowed. It's fine, sister-in-law. Zhou Zi rubbed his head and laughed bitterly. By the way, sister-in-law, what I wanted to say is that there really isn't anything going on between Brother Qin Zong and Odd Zhua, and Brother Qin Zong has a wife. Zhou Zi had actually learned about this by chance when he had been chatting with Qin Zong not long ago. Hearing this, Kamiya Ryoko instantly blushed and wished she could dig a hole and bury herself in it. Heavens, what had she done? She had actually suspected that Qin Zong was a pervert who liked men. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Thus, Kamiya Ryoko turned around and apologized to Qin Zong. She was really too ashamed. It's fine, it was just a misunderstanding. Qin Zong gave her his trademark smile. In fact, he wasn't angry at Kamiya Ryoko's misunderstanding at all. On the contrary, He thought this jealous feeling was a little cute. Young girls in love were probably all the same. They always liked to let their imagination run wild, and problems would arise as they thought about it. But now was clearly not the time to let one's imagination run wild. Because 1212 was still alive. And right in front of them, it had already finished reassembling. It was only then that everyone clearly saw what 1212 looked like. It was a strange humanoid creature with praying mantis hands and a bloody mouth filled with sharp teeth. Just looking at it gave people a horrifying feeling. According to the information provided by Mr. Zhao Ming, we'll have to kill 1212 1,260,000 times to kill him. I'm afraid it won't be that easy, Zhou Zi said at that moment. That's not necessarily the case. Most indescribable creatures have the ability to resurrect. But as long as they don't want to resurrect and stop thinking about resurrection, we don't have to kill him 1,260,000 times. Monk Jin Dang smiled and stepped forward. This little monk has a plan. What is it, Senior Jin Dang? Lotus Sun was curious. It's just an idea I just thought of. I just need to make this little benefactor give up on the idea of resurrection. Monk Jin Dang smiled kindly. He felt that the success rate of his idea was extremely high, and perhaps it could make 1212 give up on the idea of resurrection. Damn humans. I'm going to kill you all. By now, 1212 had finished reassembling, and disgusting mucus was coming out of his bloody mouth. But Jin Dang was even faster. He swiftly came up behind 1212 and slapped the ground behind him. In a flash, a solid wall of earth was constructed behind 1212, and Jin Dang even blessed the wall with a light consecration spell. Have you played table tennis before? Monk Jin Dang asked. Everyone, ? At that moment, Monk Jin Dang stepped forward without another word and lightly patted Zhou Zi on the back. Then, Zhou Zi once again turned into a beam of light and shot out. And now, in front of everyone's eyes, a miraculous scene was unfolding. 1212 stood in front of the blessed wall, impressively becoming a human pillar of flesh. Zhou Zi was sent flying by Monk Jin Dang's palm, smashing 1212 to pieces. Before 1212 could finish his cursing, he was stopped. Then, Zhou Zi bounced back from the wall behind 1212, and was sent flying again, smashing the resurrected 1212 to pieces, palm after palm, over and over again, over and over again. It was like a table tennis training session, at the 1600th round. 1212 fell into utter despair and gave up on the idea of resurrection. It was killed as soon as it was resurrected. It no longer wanted to continue this kind of life without any game experience. 1212 left very peacefully. Chapter 1672. In the endless cycle of resurrection and instant death, 1212 finally gave up on the idea of survival and chose to manually delete his account. After Zhou Zi's final wave of attacks scattered 1212, Golden Lamp Monk confirmed that it was impossible for 1212 to come back to life as a pile of minced meat, and then stopped what he was doing. Is it resolved? Zhou Zi stared at the scene in front of him in disbelief. While Golden Lamp Monk had been using him, he had been bounced around non-stop, but to tell the truth, he hadn't felt the slightest bit uncomfortable. On the contrary, he had felt comfortable, as if his whole body had been massaged. This period of time seemed very long, but also very short. By the time he came back to his senses, 1212 was already unable to get up again. Benefactor Zhou's merits are immeasurable. Golden Lamp Monk put his palms together in a Buddhist salute and praised him to his face. Z, it's been hard on you. You deserve the most credit for this. Zhuo was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. Because this way, 1212 would be confirmed to have been killed by Zhou Zi, and no one would be able to step in and steal his head. Zhou Zi, on the other hand, looked ashamed. He rubbed his head, completely at a loss as to what was going on, and could only marvel in his heart at the powerful defensive capabilities of these long johns. Zhuo hadn't lied to him, these long johns were really very strong. Furthermore, they were ridiculously strong. It was just that Zhou felt that something was a little strange. Brother Zhua made me wear these long johns before he brought me here, saying that they would protect me. Zhou murmured in his heart. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that Zhua's goal wasn't just to keep him safe. Why did it look like he had deliberately arranged for him to pick up the slack? For a moment, Zhou's thoughts were a little disordered. All of this couldn't be said to be impeccable. It was almost all part of Zhua's plan, which made Zhou feel that Zhua seemed especially familiar with this aspect. While Zhou was lost in his thoughts, his body suddenly emitted waves of hot steam. It first seeped out from the pores on his body, and then concentrated and gushed out from the top of his head, like a human-shaped chimney. This is... Zhou turned pale with astonishment. After spirit power accumulates to a certain level, it will naturally be released from the top of your head and you've completed your breakthrough. This is a sign that you're about to advance. Congratulations, Z. Qin Zong understood what had happened at a glance. Zhou was shocked again. I advanced? Yes, if my judgment is correct, he should be at the peak of the late stage of the foundational level. Zhou's mouth was agape, and he looked dumbfounded. What the hell, you can also ascend like this? Seeing that Zhou had successfully advanced just like that, he was even happier. Z. You're too outstanding. Zhou, all this time, Zhua had actually been looking for a reasonable successor to the King of Scavengers. Now, it seemed that Zhou did indeed have the ability to inherit his legacy. Not only did he manage to get rid of a troublesome living being on this trip, he even managed to ascend a level. Peak Foundation Establishment Late Stage. At Zhou's age, this realm was enough to be considered a genius. And Zhou's next step was the Jidun stage. Before entering university, there were very few cultivators who could directly break through to the Golden Core stage. This once again proved Zhou's outstanding talent in cultivation. At least in Zhua's opinion, Zhou was much stronger than he had been back then. On the other side, the expression of Na Wei, who had been sitting upright all this time, changed dramatically the moment 1212's life information completely disappeared. He had never expected that one of the two shelter creatures he had sent out would already be killed in a second. 1212. This was the most brutal of all the newly recruited creatures. Furthermore, it had the ability to resurrect indefinitely. It had actually died, just like that? Na Wei felt that the situation was a little unreal. Where's 096? What's 096 doing? He slapped the table, unable to restrain his anger. The spherical guard then used the surveillance flying insect circling the castle to transmit the scene. At that moment, 096 was being ridden by a baby. Its face was a little flushed, and its snow-white rabbit fur shook as it ran down the street, as happy as a lotus flower. Seeing this scene, Na Wei almost couldn't help but spit out 3 liters of blood. The two shelter creatures he had sent out, one had been killed in a second, and the other had become someone's mount. Wasn't this just like one of them giving someone a free kill and experience, and the other giving someone a bunch of equipment? Where did this brat come from? Na Wei felt that Wang Wan's sudden appearance was even more inconceivable. This was just a baby girl who looked to be less than a year old. How could she have subdued 096 into submission? Go and find out which family this kid belongs to. Sir, there are currently no records of the baby girl's identity in the database. We suspect that she is an unregistered resident. These words dealt a heavy blow to Na Wei's brain. Unregistered resident? A child who had been smuggled in from the slums? Although he couldn't be bothered to look at the slums, the identity census was still in place. Everyone was recorded, so it was unlikely that someone from the slums would sneak in. Then, the only possibility was that someone might have invaded this illusory realm and brought this baby girl in. Although Na Wei felt that this was inconceivable, he couldn't completely rule out this possibility. As his body trembled violently, a boundless hatred followed. Na Wei had wanted to teach Na Wei a lesson, but he didn't expect that he had underestimated the ferocity of this group of people. Although he hadn't completely given up on the ultimate version of the neo-ancient mystical weapon plan, the successive failures finally caused Na Wei to be a little overwhelmed. This was his master and his imperial city. In his territory, he was the one who bullied others. He couldn't be bullied like this. Pass down my order. Increase the intensity. Eliminate all these people. Seeing that the illusory realm might have been invaded by external enemies, Na Wei couldn't just sit back and watch. Therefore, he decided to carry out the following 3 plans. Sir, what do you plan to do? In the core area, release all the sheltered creatures in the SCP-001-010 area. In addition, dispatch the entire army of 10,000 neo-ancient mystical weapons that can be mobilized to search the entire area. At this moment, that person also stood up. In addition, I've decided to do it personally. To ensure that the illusory realm wouldn't be infiltrated by external forces, he had to do this. Shouchong's brain had been harvested. The Wuxin ancestors' pantheon brain, which was made from Shouchong's brain cells, had also been completed. Now, he just needed to merge the pantheon brain with his own brain. He would become this world's. No. Even the most intelligent existence in this universe. Achieving a perfect dimensionality reduction attack. Chapter 1673. It was as if he had slept for a very long time. When Shouchong regained consciousness, he felt that his soul was in an out-of-body state. A rather familiar-looking human brain was immersed in a green spirit fluid, and it was connected to an unknown body through a series of conduits. After a burst of intense mental pain, he felt that his entire soul was floating, as if it had been hooked by something. When he came back to his senses, he was already imprisoned on an electric chair in a pitch-black space. This is the Wisdom Realm? Shouchong, who had once been selected as the most intelligent youth, understood what this place was at a glance. The Wisdom Realm was a special spiritual domain that only great wise people had. It was a place that was tempered by the Naiwen Palace where mental power was gathered. Those who were slightly stronger could temper the Naiwen Palace into other derivative spaces such as memory palaces. And the highest realm was the Wisdom Realm. It was an existence that included all the advanced spaces of the Naiwen Palace. In theory, people with the Wisdom Realm could use the brain waves emitted from their brains to do anything through the power of mental transmission. However, Shouchong never thought that one day his brain would be used to merge and become someone else's appendage. Now, he was imprisoned in the Wisdom Realm. If this situation was explained in a similar academic language in the cultivation world, it was actually a different kind of possession. Possession? At this moment, in the dim and boundless Wisdom Realm, the owner of this body's illusory voice clearly fell into Shouchong's ears. Shouchong, you'd better not make a mistake. I'm just taking back what belongs to me on behalf of Master. Your master? Shouchong frowned. Previously, when his soul was in a free state, he had seen the appearance of the owner of this body with his own eyes. In his limited memory, he didn't seem to have any conflicts with this person. However, to Na Wei, everything seemed to be unimportant. In his eyes, Shouchong was just a tool to revive the God brain. Although the God brain hadn't been completely built yet, it was probably only 70% activated. But Na Wei still felt that with his current mental power, he could become an omnipotent existence. No one would have thought that the brain of the wisest person in the universe, the heartless ancestor, would be inherited by him, the only true disciple in this way. Na Wei sneered. He held a metal cane in his hand and wore a blood-colored cloak as he walked out of the palace step by step. He had no intention of explaining anything to Shouchong. This was because once the Pantheon brain was activated to 100%, it meant that Shouchong's brain would completely fuse with him. At that time, it would only take a snap of a finger to completely destroy Shouchong's personality and retain his own. Completely eliminating the foreign enemies was Na Wei's current top priority. Outside the castle, when the 10 huge cubes were transmitted to different locations in the core area at the same time, the powerful pressure brought by these indescribable creatures immediately radiated to the entire majestic imperial city below. Inside the astrology club, Xiang Yi lay on the ground and used the scope to clearly see the serial numbers of these containment devices. Their containment creatures 001-010. Although Xiang Yi had explored the holding area under the castle a few times, he didn't have the time to investigate it thoroughly. Because there were too many creatures, close to 10,000. Most of the sheltered creatures in the 010-010 area were kept in the depths of the area. There was no way to obtain specific information, and the only problem was that they didn't know what kind of strange abilities these creatures had. But using 096 as a standard, the average strength of these sheltered creatures was peak Dao God, and the strongest were Dao ancestors who had just entered the progenitor realm. There's no other way. At that moment, Xiang Yi sighed slightly as he focused his gaze on the scope. Next to him, he and Wang Ming tacitly said in unison, "We can only kill them all." After saying that, Wang Ming and Xiang Yi looked at each other and smiled. Great minds think alike. That was probably it. This is also the first time I've met Mr. Ming. How do you know that I have the ability to kill them all? Xiang Yi smiled bitterly. That's right, it's the first time. But I'm actually very confident in Brother Xiang's strength. Wang Ming also laughed. Also, my little brother was also there. Lord Na Wei in the castle probably didn't expect that he would be jumping around in front of Wang Fa with a single shot. Wang Ming's words made so much sense that Xiang Yi couldn't refute them for a moment. To be honest, he felt that Wang Ming wasn't wrong at all. After all, Wang Ling was here. Even if the sky fell down, there would be someone to hold it up. Thinking of this, he looked at his 3.2 billion light-year sighting scope and became abnormally excited. His fair face suddenly became flushed. Are you that happy? Wang Ming smiled. Of course. Xiang Yi said excitedly. Now that I know Ling Zhenren is backing me up, I don't need to worry. If I can steal 1 or 2 more heads from Ling Zhenren, I can brag about it for the rest of my life. Wang Ming, that was right, except for those who knew Wang Ling well. No one knew how exciting it was to be able to steal a kill from Wang Ling. In fact, Xiang Yi wasn't the only one who had this thought. Just as the 10-cube containment devices appeared in full view of the crowd, before they were unsealed, Zhua and Kamiya Ryoko finally explained their relationship with Wang Ling. Kamiya Ryoko was still digesting the massive amount of information. This, you mean, classmate Wang Ling isn't your disciple at all, but, your Shifu? Yes. Zhua nodded. Ryoko, I'm very sorry all this time. I didn't mean to lie to you. I actually wanted to say it back then, but I still needed my Shifu's permission first. In that instant, Kamiya Ryoko instantly understood. The truth she had been seeking for so many years also came to an end at that moment. Because according to the timeline, the 10-year-old boy whom the Daycrawler ghost had seen back then should have been Wang Ling. In that instant, all the inexplicable dots connected. Ryoko, don't blame Senior Zhua. I asked him to keep it a secret back then. After all, the fewer people who know about classmate Wang Ling, the better, Lotus Sun said. Actually, she had already made a plan. If Kamiya Ryoko really couldn't accept Zhua hiding something from her, she would go all out, and use Mysterious Sea's sword chi to manually erase Kamiya Ryoko's memory. Although this would be a little like a pair of beautiful sisters, at least it wouldn't destroy their relationship. In the end, Kamiya Ryoko's reaction was much better than she had imagined. Although it looked like she had taken a long time to digest it, at least she had accepted it. On the other hand, Zhou Zi and Qin Zong on the side did indeed lower their heads after hearing about it, looking thoughtful. Lotus Sun knew that she would have to explain things later. But for now, it was more important to deal with Kamiya Ryoko. Fortunately, Kamiya Ryoko wasn't angry. Instead, like Jai Yin back then, she was deeply curious about Wang Ling's true strength. Kamiya Ryoko, then, how strong is classmate Wang Ling? Nascent soul? Soul formation? Or... At that moment, Monk Jin Deng suddenly stepped forward and said, Miss Ryoko, do you see those containment devices in the sky? Miss Ryoko, did you feel how strong they are just now? Given Senior Jin Deng's strength, I think he should be able to kill one of them in an instant, said Kumir Yoko. Yes. Jean Deng nodded. If this little monk goes all out, he can indeed kill one of them with one palm. But Ling Junren is different. Kumir Yoko, what's the difference? Jean Deng, he can kill 100 million with one palm. Kumir Yoko. Chapter 1674. As the indescribable creature number 001010 stood in the air, its powerful aura was released at random and swept through the entire area. Their containment devices were destroyed in the air, and that ancient light seemed to extend from time immemorial to the present, giving it an air of eternity. Everyone in the imperial city was shocked by this scene. The nobles trembled and wanted to escape from the core region. However, at this moment, their legs were stiff. Every single one of them was attacked by these cube creatures. The fear that originated from the spirit made every single resident of the imperial city cower and tremble in fear. They were at a loss as to what to do. What the hell is going on? Everything was fine, why did this happen all of a sudden? Is this a natural disaster? What on earth are these cubes? Everyone was stupefied. Even the most powerful dignitaries in Imperial City didn't understand what was going on. In the air, the 10 containment cubes burst out with dazzling light, and as the cubes gradually opened up, a desolate aura hit everyone in the face. For a moment, the residents of Imperial City saw the same illusion. They saw a huge amount of blood spurt out of these cubes like a waterfall, and an extremely murderous aura attacked everything in front of them. Rubbing his eyes, the illusion of a bloody sea of slaughter instantly disappeared, and what followed was a series of explosions that sounded like the rumbling of the Great Tao. 10 humanoid monsters of different shapes and sizes broke out of their cocoons, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. But unlike 1212 and 096, these indescribable creatures looked like they were being controlled as they obediently stood where they were and didn't make any big movements. Wang Ling was calm. Sweeping his king's eye over them, he saw the mental threads that were connected to the heads of these 10 containment creatures. Sure enough, it was as he had thought, someone was manipulating these 10 containment creatures. To be able to manipulate 10 indescribable creatures at the same time, Wang Ling felt that this person was pretty fierce. But fortunately, the current situation was under control. Are they the creatures of the old days? At that moment, Wang Ling stared at all these creatures, his calm gaze seemingly able to see through the ages. A while ago, he had just had a showdown with the grave god, who claimed to have inherited the bloodline of the outer gods of the old days. He hadn't expected to run into him again. He still had that strange eye embryo. Although he couldn't find any connection between it and the king's eye at the moment, he firmly believed that it might be able to think of another way for him to perfectly suppress his power. However, it was clear that this was not the time to experiment. There were too many innocent people in this imperial city. In the end, they still had to move these 10 sheltered creatures to other places. Thus, the moment he opened his king's eye, the 3-petal golden lotus in his eye instantly bloomed. A golden vortex appeared in the sky, gradually expanding from the size of a coin to the size of a vast lake. Then, it swept in all directions, spreading all along the way, giving birth to countless golden vines. What I saw was a city. Down below, the people in the imperial city were dazzled by this miraculous and shocking scene. Above their heads, a vast cluster of buildings appeared. Towering ancient buildings overflowed with light and color, and exuded boundless divinity that filled the entire sky. This was a heavenly city. As high as the sky, this was another ability that Wang Ling had never displayed before. Heavenly King's Eye. This was the heavenly world, created by the King's Eye's enormous power, a supreme space that was above that supreme world, core world, intrinsic spirit field, and all the other big and small worlds created by the power of chaos. Falling into someone else's space meant that the ruler of that space could control you. The ruler was a godlike existence. But the truth was that there was a limit to this. If the other party's spatial ability was greater than that of the ruler of space, they could do the opposite and directly annex the other party's space. Not only could they achieve the reverse polarity, they could even absorb the other party's space for their own use. This meant that as long as Wang Ling wanted to. Back when he had been in the Grave God Supreme world, he had been able to completely devour it. But that world had been tainted with too much blood. He was worried that his heavenly world would hurt his eyes after devouring the Supreme world, so in the end he hadn't done it. This is the city of heavenly worlds? Xiang Yi used his 3.2 billion light-year scope to see everything clearly. He couldn't help but mutter. This was really outrageous. A golden city of heavenly worlds that stretched as far as the eye could see appeared in front of everyone just like that. All the buildings inside glowed with magic light, and every brick and stone was engraved with powerful nomological imprints. It wasn't just one great Tao. The power of all kinds of great Tao crisscrossed on it and then spread out. The indescribable sense of grandeur and magnificence hit everyone's hearts, making them shudder with fear. Everyone in the imperial city was stupefied when they saw this scene. Including Na Wei, who had been leading the team to search the entire city for suspects. They all stood rooted to the spot at that moment. He had clearly fused with the god brain and had activated it to 70% capacity, but he still couldn't stop trembling. This huge city of heavenly worlds gave off an unimaginable sense of oppression. Just by being connected together, it was almost enough to make people feel the urge to kneel down and worship it. Even monk Jin Deng was completely stunned. With one look, he knew that this had to be Wang Ling's doing, so he naturally sighed. The city of heavenly worlds. Ling Zhenren is the only true god in the world. Even Jin Deng sighed with emotion, so it was obvious that Lotus Sun's and Jamiya Ryoko's beautiful faces had turned pale. Apart from them, Zhou Zi and Qin Zong were also naturally shocked. It was only when Odd Zhua had laid his cards on the table with Jamiya Ryoko just now that Zhou Zi had learned that Wang Ling was his Shifu. He had thought it was a joke. It even felt a little unreal. How could Odd Zhua, the grand savior of the cultivation world who had thwarted the sky-swallowing toad back then, be the junior brother of a foundation establishment student? But now, with the appearance of the city of heavenly worlds, Zhou Zi realized that he was too young. Then, he figured it all out. No wonder Odd Zhua was so eager for him to make a contribution in this operation. At first, he had thought that this was Odd Zhua's test for him, but in fact, this was simply his application to become a disciple. If he could become Odd Zhua's disciple and Wang Ling's grand disciple, he would truly be able to soar on the spot. Even if he lost 2 legs over the next decade or so, it wouldn't matter. In the next few years, he might grow faster than anyone else even if he walked backwards. Of course, the person who was most shocked by this scene was, at that moment, it was none other than Qin Zong. He had heard so much about Wang Ling from Gu Xuanji. He had never expected that he would actually fall into Wang Ling's world line. Qin Zong would never have expected it. This was the man who had been placed on his offering table for him to worship all year round. Now, this man was in flesh and blood in front of him. With those familiar dead fish eyes and the faint sound of breathing, he was alive. Chapter 1675. Qin Zong had always admired Wang Ling from the bottom of his heart. He had never seen Wang Ling in person, but had heard a lot of legends about him from Gu Xuanji. Now that he had actually seen Wang Ling in person, his mood was actually very complicated. He was a mix of excitement, disbelief and the urge to laugh out loud. Perhaps he should have realized long ago that when grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had said the name, Senior Gu, in that tavern called Excellent Era, he should have realized which world line he had fallen into. For Qin Zong, seeing Wang Ling was in fact a powerful tranquilizer, because it meant that he didn't have to worry about not being able to return to his original world at all. After all, the great Ling Zhenren was omnipotent. The god brain had captured these 10 hosts and manipulated them by that smell, but the reality was that no matter how much that smell tried to control them with its mental strength, it couldn't manipulate their bodies in the slightest. From 001 to 010, these 10 indescribably powerful beings hovered in the vast and boundless sky. The moment the epic golden all-heaven city appeared, it was as if they had been petrified and were completely motionless. The all-heavens world was destroyed. In the face of this overwhelming power, no creature was strong enough to contend with Wang Ling. Countless golden vines hung down from the golden all-heaven city and aimed at these host creatures. In an instant, they were all tied up at an incredibly slow but also incredibly fast speed, and then dragged into the all-heavens world. When Wang Ling opened his eyes again, the world and the sky had already been turned upside down. He was standing on a golden city, and every brick under his feet was transformed from the supreme great Tao. In front of him were 10 hosts who looked like they had only just reacted. In just a split second, Wang Ling withdrew his power of sight. In that instant, these 10 powerful hosts were sucked into the all-heavens world of the king's eye. Roar! Number 001 hammered the ground and let out a strange cry. He had 6 iron arms, and the moment his small mountain-like fist touched the ground of the all-heavens world, the power of the great Tao in the ground backlashed him, and he rolled on the ground as if he had been electrocuted. Wang Ling hadn't made a move, and hadn't even used the divine power of the heavenly worlds to crush it, but because of this simple hammer blow, the creature inside number 001 was already on the verge of death. However, the miserable state of number 001 did not strike fear into the rest of the host creatures. Most of these indescribable creatures had the ability to heal themselves, so they generally ignored the injuries on their bodies. On the contrary, when they saw that number 001 was injured, they all turned around and began to dismember him inhumanely. In just a moment, number 001 was reduced to a pile of bones. Then, the other 9 hosts suddenly became even more powerful. From their auras to their bodies, they all received a brand new boost. In fact, Wang Ling had never thought that the shelter creatures would have this trick up their sleeves. They would actually be so brutal as to devour their companions in order to activate their new power. But this power was still not enough for Wang Ling. No matter how much these creatures devoured and grew, they couldn't change the current situation. He stretched out his index finger and pointed to 002 in front of him. Boom! There, the golden light rushed into the sky, and number 002 exploded on the spot, breaking into pieces. Then, the chunks of flesh that had been blown away in all directions turned into strips of flesh that resembled worms, and regrouped in all directions. They weren't affected by the heavy injury effect? Wang Ling was slightly astonished. Because of what had happened in the past. The creatures he had beaten up had almost no chance of reforming or healing. But perhaps because of their different physiques, these creatures weren't affected by the heavy injury effect at all. Thus, Wang Ling, who had felt that the battle was a little boring, became a little more spirited. This meant that he could try out some other spells that he had never used before. Normally, he wouldn't have had the chance to experiment at all. On the other side, as Wang Ling and the 10 great hosts entered the heavenly worlds, that overwhelming sense of oppression in the imperial city also dissipated. Na Wei didn't know what had happened, but when Wang Ling left, he suddenly felt that he could do it again. Listen to my command, clean up immediately. Using the god brain to connect to the will of tens of thousands of new ancient divine weapons, he began to manipulate them in square formations, and immediately locked onto a target to focus fire on. That target was Wang Yuan, who was writing 096 everywhere. He was sure that this foreign baby girl definitely had connections with other outsiders, so he decided to attack her. This way, he might be able to attract other outsiders. In any case, she was just a baby. Even though she seemed to be playing along well with 096, for some reason, 096 was willing to be her mount and hadn't attacked her. But 096 was just a host in the end. How could it be a match for his 30,000 perfect new ancient divine weapons? After Na Wei gave the order, the square formation of new ancient divine weapons closest to Wang Yuan swiftly surrounded her along the street. There were more than 100 Tao God-level new ancient divine weapons. This made 096 feel a little nervous. Wang Yuan pulled 096 rabbit ears, her expression as calm as an ancient well. Xiang Yi, on the other hand, was extremely worried as he looked through his high-powered scope. Mr. Ming, this girl is surrounded, don't worry, it's fine. Wang Ming's face was calm. Sure enough, not long after Wang Ming said this, a familiar emerald green light shone from Wang Yuan's body. Because of the huge difference in numbers, the Sword Spirit Savior contract was triggered again. Thus, Lang Ming had been summoned here from the Sword King world. Although it had only been a few days since their last battle, Lang Ming's battle strength had changed completely every time he appeared on the battlefield. He had grown even more. His Excellency the Lord of the City wants us to arrest her. If you don't want to die, get out of the way. The leader of the new ancient divine weapons was blonde. These people's appearances and hairstyles had all been automatically created using big data, and each of them looked different. That's strange. I'll return those words to you. Lang Ming said as he stood in front of Wang Yuan and hovered slightly in the air. His nimble training clothes fluttered even though there was no wind, showing off his divinity. This team of new ancient divine weapons was stunned, which then turned into anger. The auras of more than 100 Dao gods overlapped and bombarded Lang Ming in an attempt to teach him a lesson. But Lang Ming didn't even take half a step back. I've already warned you. Don't blame me for attacking. Lang Ming snorted softly. He opened his small palm, and an emerald green blade of grass appeared in it. Little friend, are you going to kill someone with this blade of grass? The blonde man and the troops behind him instantly laughed. Lang Ming didn't say anything else. Boom! He threw out the blade of grass and cut through the street. His movements were unbelievably fast, and the blade of grass instantly split the street in two, creating a bottomless abyss. Countless new ancient divine weapons couldn't react in time and fell into the abyss on the spot. Then, the crack in the abyss swiftly closed at a speed that the naked eye could see, and the street was quiet once more. Because in that moment, Lang Ming remembered what Jinka had taught him. Jinka had said to him, destroying the environment is not right, so Lang Ming felt that it was fine as long as you destroyed it and then repaired it. This way, it wouldn't be considered going against Shifu's wishes. Chapter 1676. No one would have thought that the power of a blade of grass could be so terrifying. It was only a few inches long, but the moment it pierced through, it exuded an unparalleled divinity, and its light was so bright that it could illuminate eternity. Bringing with it a terrifying sword intent that seemed to have pierced through the ages, it instantly split the ground beneath its feet into two and opened up a chaotic abyss, burying all these Tao deity-level neo-ancient divine weapons in the chaos of the abyss. Then, the cracks in the ground closed up, and a long row of grass sprouted from where the sword intent had just been released. In the blink of an eye, 1/10 of the 30,000 Tao god-level neo-ancient divine weapons had been killed on the spot by Lang Ming's blade of grass. This was a huge deterrent. If it wasn't for the fact that there were innocent people on the streets, Lang Ming felt that he could have made a bigger ruckus, and maybe he could have directly wiped out the scene on his own. It was just a Tao god. Given his current abilities, it was as easy as chopping vegetables for him to cut down Tao gods with his sword. This was the result of Jinka and Bai Qiao's daily and nightly special training. Furthermore, there was another advantage to helping Lang Ming, and that was that they could learn from each other. It wasn't just Lang Ming who had improved, even Jinka and Bai Qiao had become stronger than before. This meant that once Jinka and Bai Qiao fused into Jingbai again, Jingbai would be much stronger than before. In the blink of an eye, he had lost 3,000 neo-ancient divine weapons. After these mental links were severed from the god brain, Na Wei's god brain also fell into a brief standstill. In that instant, a large number of the nerves in his brain that were connected to the neo-ancient divine weapons were severed like fragile noodles. At the same time, pain from the mental backlash followed, but it didn't last too long, and Na Wei quickly came back to his senses. When he did, anger immediately welled up in his brain. He flew into a rage, and with a stomp of his feet, he soared into the sky. In an instant, all the ancient divine weapons moved at the same time, and they transformed into wisps of flowing light that converged from all directions. They actually wrapped around his torso, limbs, and head and started fusing together. At that moment, the most powerful auras continuously overlapped and converged on Na Wei's body. When a total of 27,000 ancient divine armaments with Tao God energy assembled in the air, a 60-meter-tall ancient god giant appeared before everyone. With the blue sky above his head and the earth beneath his feet, just a wave of his arm could bring forth boundless might. An astonishing amount of energy was being released, instantly engulfing the entire illusory realm of nothingness. This was an automatic search through the Pantheon brain. Since Na Wei had all the information of the natives, it only needed to go through a process of elimination to find the ants that had infiltrated this world. I will kill all of you. With Na Wei's god brain as its core, the ancient god giant put its mountainous wide palms together and formed a seal, sucking grenade-throwing senior Immortal, Loopy Toad, Xiang Yi, Qin Zong, Kimi or Yoko, and the others into its supreme world. This supreme world that was built within the huge stone array was filled with large pieces of irregularly shaped stones. They were piled up together and covered densely with obscure chaos runes. Just looking at them with the naked eye would cause one to feel dizzy. Why are we suddenly here? Grenade-throwing senior Immortal and Loopy Toad were astonished. They had initially moved together with the intention of directly destroying the nest that housed the creatures, but hadn't expected Na Wei to bring them to the supreme world not long after they had gone in. Oh no. Mr. Ming is still outside. Xiang Yi was extremely nervous, Nine Yang divine sword in hand. Ah! At that moment, An Wan, who was lying on Lang Ming's back, cried out softly. What did spiritual Master Wan say? Xiang Yi was bewildered. This was infant language, and other people couldn't understand it, but as a sword spirit, Lang Ming naturally understood. Thus, Lang Ming translated, An Wan said that she has already sent 096 to protect Mr. Ming, so there's no need to worry about him. Hearing this, Xiang Yi swallowed. He could only say that as expected of a big shot, he had actually predicted in advance that he would be sucked into the supreme world, and had contacted 096 on the spot to protect Wang Ming. At that moment, Xiang Yi just wanted to say to himself that he was still too young. Sure enough, whether it was Ling Zhenren or his sister, they were the standard monsters, and monsters couldn't be measured by normal cultivator logic. At that moment in the supreme world, Na Wei had thought that doing this would increase his deterrence. However, it didn't seem to be the case. These people were clearly outsiders, and they were even sucked into his supreme world. But what Na Wei found very strange was that these people didn't seem to be afraid at all. Not only were they not afraid, they were even chatting. I never thought this guy would have this trick up his sleeve. He can actually absorb and combine these new ancient divine weapons for his own use. If he's really able to mass-produce all the new ancient divine weapons in the entire illusory world, I'm afraid his strength will be even more terrifying, Audiobook said with a frown. Then what should we do next? If we can't defeat this big guy, I'm afraid we won't be able to break free from this supreme world, right? Lotus Sun asked. She was very relaxed and content with the mysterious sea in her hand, itching to try. After all, she had just laid her cards on the table with Jimi or Yoko, which meant that she no longer needed to be afraid. This humble monk suggests that Miss Rong should attack later. This humble monk, little friend Xiang Yi, little friend Qin Zong, little friend Lang Ming and spiritual master Nuan will take the lead. Then, senior Immortal, little friend Loopy Toad, Mr. Zhua and little friend Z will take the second round. Finally, Miss Rong and Miss Jamia will wrap things up. Lotus Sun and Jamia or Yoko, this plan indeed sounded flawless and safe. But why did it sound like they were picking up scraps? What was even more horrifying was that Zhou Zi could actually fight the second round. But when she thought of how Zhou Zi had been bounced around the field like a ping-pong ball, she instantly felt relieved. Then let's do as Senior Golden Lamp says. At that moment, Qin Zong couldn't help laughing. This ancient god giant is using some kind of method to reassemble its power. While this supreme world is indeed a genuine supreme world, it's also flashy without substance. If it can be defeated, the supreme world's power will be weakened little by little. Senior Golden Lamp's skill is very good. Monk Golden Lamp waved his hand and hurriedly stretched out his palm. Golden light overflowed in his palm, and the golden light of Virokana coalesced in his hand. Then, everyone, according to the plan, this humble monk will snipe the head in the first round. Xiang Yi quickly climbed down and started to adjust his 9-yang divine sword. Then, I'll focus on the left and right arms. Qin Zong nodded. That's good, then the left and right legs are mine. Wang Wan, ah. Ah ah ah. Xiang Yi and Qin Zong, question mark. Ling Ming, An Wan said she'll attack the middle. At that moment, all the men on the field couldn't help tensing up, only the smell made their scalps numb. This group of people, in his supreme world, they were actually discussing how to attack him so calmly. They simply didn't give him any face. They didn't care about martial ethics at all. Chapter 1677. In the illusory world of nothingness, everyone from Battle's sect had been moved away by the god brain, except for 3 people. The first was Wang Ming. Because he was currently borrowing Jia Bugui's body, he hadn't been recognized by the god brain. The remaining 2 were Li Xian and Zhang Ziden. Na Wei had acted too quickly just now. It was almost a second before he had sent out his brainwaves to pull everyone from Battle's sect into the supreme world, and Wang Ming had already guessed what the other party was going to do. After all, Na Wei had already activated the god brain, and Wang Ming's current state was nothing more than a branch of his own brainwaves, so it was probably impossible for him to match them. Thus, at this critical moment, Wang Ming swiftly spread out his brainwaves and chose Li Xian and Zhang Ziden. Using his insignificant strength in comparison to that smell, he used his brainwaves to form a shield so that the 2 of them couldn't be identified for a short period of time. This concealment layer was more troublesome than he had imagined, and it took Wang Ming less than 30 seconds to cast it. Although he had succeeded in tricking the smell, his head was extremely hot and steaming with smoke. Fortunately, he had been prepared. Before Monk Jin Dang and the others had been sucked into the supreme world, Wang Ming had already asked Monk Jin Dang to leave behind a few talismans to lower the temperature, which would just about last them through this period. As expected of Ling Jinren's brother. Very quickly, Li Xian and Zhang Ziden appeared in front of Wang Ming almost instantly. They were the first to enter the illusory world, and currently had the most information. Now that the battle in the high world was in full swing, Na Wei thought that he had already drawn all the outsiders into the high world, leaving the entire illusory nothingness defenseless. In Wang Ming's eyes, this was an excellent opportunity. Greetings, seniors. Wang Ming bowed. His body was a little weak, and he didn't look like he was in a good condition. Just as Wang Ming was about to fall, Li Xian stepped forward to support him. After sensing Wang Ming's condition, he was extremely amazed. You're just an ordinary person, but you're actually able to do this. He couldn't imagine that an ordinary person who wasn't even a cultivator could actually use the human brain to such an extreme. Furthermore, he was only using a branch of his brainwaves to form a shield to resist Na Wei's 70% god brain. This situation made both Li Xian and Zhang Ziba extremely astonished. He didn't know if the divine brain had shrunk or if Wang Ming was really too strong. I'm sorry, senior. I'm fine. In the end, these brain waves won't last long, but it's already a great fortune to be able to keep the 2 seniors here, Wang Ming said at that moment. In fact, he had carefully considered leaving Li Xian and Zhang Zijin behind at the critical moment. Furthermore, the moment the shield formed, Wang Ming used his power to simultaneously collect the intelligence that the 2 of them had collected so far. Of course, Li Xian and Zhang Zizi knew who Wang Ming was and didn't put up any resistance, otherwise, it wouldn't have gone so smoothly. Right now, the most dangerous things in this imperial city are the creatures that have been taken in. The reason why I left the 2 of you here is mainly so that the 2 of you can deal with these fellows. Wang Ming said. Both seniors came from the corpse wrapping picture. Their current bodies were created by the King's Eye illusion, and they were reconstructed using the technique of the coexistence of illusion and reality. It looks like it's made of flesh and blood, but it's actually just an illusion. That's right. Zhang Zi nodded and said, in our current state, we are indeed just 2 dead people. Therefore, we don't have to be afraid of those shelter creatures. He more or less understood Wang Ming's meaning. In fact, there was no one more suitable than him and Li Xian to deal with those troublesome hosts. That was because the majority of the hosts had the ability to resurrect, and the slightest carelessness could cause them to suffer under their strange abilities. If they were to use regular troops to deal with them, they would probably suffer greatly. But he and Li Xian were different. Since he was already a dead man, he did not mind dying a few more times. Thanks to the eye power of the king's eye, no matter how serious his and Li Xian's injuries looked, they would automatically recover. It could be said to be the advanced version of the impure earth reincarnation. But even so, Li Xian and Zhang Zidi weren't very confident in dealing with the hosts. They were the first to sneak in, and when they learned that grenade-throwing Senior Immortal and Loopy Toad were also going to sneak under the castle, they planned to meet up with them to find a solution to the shelter's problem. Unfortunately, before they could meet, the man and the dog were sucked into the Supreme World. I know your concerns, seniors, so I've already thought about it. Perhaps this thing can help the two seniors. At that moment, Wang Ming's lips curled into a meaningful smile, and he took out something that looked like a scroll from his pocket. Seeing this, Li Xian and Zhang Zidi's eyes almost instantly widened. That's right, this is the small corpse wrapping painting, Wang Ming replied. Small corpse wrapping painting? Li Xian and Zhang Zidi were extremely astonished. How could there be such a thing? They knew about the eternal corpse wrapping painting, but they had never heard that it actually had a branch. I had Ling Ling's Wang Ming draw this. After he finished drawing it, it directly teleported into his hands, Wang Ming said. Wang Ming said, like the immemorial corpse wrapping painting, this is also a powerful sealing magic artifact, and it's specially made for shelter creatures. It's an independent space inside, separate from the eternal corpse wrapping painting. Seniors, if you use this magic artifact, I believe you'll definitely succeed. This was actually drawn by Ling Zhenren. Li Xian felt that Wang Ling had once again done something beyond his understanding. When did you draw it? This eternal chaotic weapon wasn't like it could lay eggs. How could it come and go as it pleased? Very quickly, before he opened the king's eyes world of heavens, he casually drew one. It's a bit casual, but it's enough to deal with that bunch of hosts. When you use it, you just need to wander around the underground space with this small corpse wrapping painting, Wang Ming said. All the hosts who try to attack you will be suppressed by this small corpse wrapping painting, and then taken into the world inside the painting. At the same time, the battle on the other side of the Supreme World was still going on. In the face of such a massive ancient god giant in the enemy camp Supreme World, it would be unrealistic to say that they weren't moved at all. It could only be said that Zhang Zong and the others had found a sense of balance in this situation when they had enough teammates. Monk Jin Dang, who had made the first move, had a pensive look on his face. Back in ancient times, he had respected his old friend Heartless Patriarch immensely. He hadn't expected to meet him again under these circumstances. Although the person he was meeting was Heartless Patriarch's successor, his disciple Na Wei. But the fluctuations given off by the god brain weren't fake. At that moment, he was the first to attack, and his first move was a Virokana golden light palm. The palm, which blotted out the sky and the sun, fell from the sky and pressed down. Every line on the palm could be clearly seen, which released golden light as the energy of the Virokana golden light palm poured into the ancient god giant's head to burn. The sky of the Supreme World turned fiery red, and it was shockingly a scene of the end of the world after a long night. Chapter 1678. It's our turn. Xiang Yi sprawled on the ground and growled. He couldn't resist the sight of such a coordinated battle. As a qualified sniper, the most important thing to do was to stay calm. However, at this time, when everyone was working together to face such a terrifying ancient god giant, everyone could not help but feel excited. They could not help but feel a surge of blood boiling in their bodies. His nine-yang divine sword was finally put to use after hiding in the illusory realm for a long time. At this time, Xiang Yi took a deep breath and focused all his attention on the high-powered Scope 3. 2 billion light-years away. This was a sniping distance of 10,000 years. There was no need to consider the angle of the sniping. As long as he locked his aura on the left and right arms of the ancient god giant, he could automatically lock onto the enemy. It could be said that he could hit wherever he pointed. At the same time, in this short moment of aiming, everyone could feel that the gigantic 9-yang divine sword sniper rifle was emitting a dazzling silver light. This was the materialization of spiritual energy. So that's how it is. Through the blessing of one's own cultivation, the bullet's power is superimposed. Jin Dang said with slight surprise. This 9-yang divine sword did not have a magazine. All the bullets were condensed by Xiang Yi through his own cultivation. In other words, Xiang Yi could control the strength of the bullets. Of course, the most important thing was, since the bullets had the ability to be retrieved, they could automatically return to Xiang Yi's side even if they were shot out. There was no waste of cultivation at all. This was the so-called perpetual movement of one's cultivation. However, Xiang Yi looked very young, so monk Jin Dang thought that the cultivation in the bullet might not be much. However, in the next moment, the slap in the face came without warning. Boom! Boom! It was clearly a sniper rifle, but when the muzzle of the gun was fired, it produced a sound like a cannonball. Senior Xiang is so strong. Lotus Sun didn't know how Xiang Yi had done it. But the 2 silver bullets carried Xiang Yi's 2,000 years of cultivation. Just like that, they turned into 2 straight beams of light and attacked the ancient god giant's right arm. A bullet with 2,000 years of cultivation? 2 bullets are equivalent to 4,000 years of cultivation. This shouldn't be your full power, right? Qin Zong's expression was also very surprised. Because Xiang Yi looked even younger than him, and did not seem to have this level of cultivation. If Xiang Yi could reach this level of cultivation at such a young age, Qin Zong could only think of one possibility, and that was that Xiang Yi might have entered a place similar to the time realm. It was a free mystic realm that drifted in the universe. Under normal circumstances, it was very difficult to find the entrance. However, because the time flow was very slow, a year and there would only be a day in the outside world. He thought that Xiang Yi's cultivation came from there. But that was not the case at all. I see. Other than going to the realm of time, you can also borrow the heavens. Borrow the sky? This explanation stunned everyone in the surroundings. It was the first time most of them had heard of such an explanation. To put it simply, the stronger you meet, the stronger you become, Monk Golden Lamp said. Borrow the heavens was not an ability that everyone possessed. Monk Golden Lamp could see that Xiang Yi was a man with a story, and to be able to obtain such an ability, he was indeed extraordinary. This ability to become stronger with the strong might be useless on other people, but it didn't hurt on Xiang Yi. Because borrowing the heavens was borrowing someone else's heavens. He could borrow anyone's heavens, convert it into cultivation, condense it on the bullet, and shoot it out. In other words, the 2 bullets with 2,000 years of cultivation and a total of 4,000 years of cultivation might not have come from Xiang Yi. The total cultivation of everyone here was more than tens of thousands of years. Xiang Yi could withdraw it according to the situation. Bang! Bang! Just as everyone was thinking, 2 silver bullets quickly hit the left and right arms of the ancient god giant. It was obvious that Na Wei wanted to reach out to block, but Xiang Yi's bullets began to turn the moment they got close. From a strange angle, they made an arc and hit the ancient god giant's arms from behind. For a moment, 2 huge mushroom clouds were blown up by the silver bullets, blowing 2 huge holes in the arms. A bunch of trash. How dare you compete with me? However, on the other side, Na Wei made a disdainful sound. Although his arms had holes in them, they were rapidly recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. The ancient god giant's self-healing ability was extremely fast. With the power of 27,000 new mystical weapons, his self-healing speed was also 27,000 times faster than before. Just blowing up his body wouldn't affect him at all. In reality, these 2 bullets were just Xiang Yi's trial design. Boom! At this moment, suddenly, a silver bullet with 8,000 years of cultivation shot out from the 9-yang divine sword sniper rifle. With a destructive force, it shot forward with destructive lethality. With a huge roar, countless space cracks formed as the bullet passed. Wherever the silver bullet passed, it was like an aurora that broke through the sky, as if it had the power to kill gods. With a horrifying aura. It was just a single bullet, but it turned into an aurora as it flew past the ground, splitting the land in front of it into two. The powerful shockwave tore it apart, splitting it into two. Countless broken rocks floated up as the space was broken. Once it hit, it could destroy the sun, moon, and stars in the sky. Xiang Yi's lips curved slightly. From a long distance, he could already feel Na Wei's fear of his silver bullet. He began to raise a huge gray-gold barrier in an attempt to block the silver bullet's advance. However, the silver bullet was too powerful. The 8,000 years of cultivation bullet had the power to penetrate armor. Almost the instant it touched the barrier, cracks appeared on its surface. He was clearly in Na Wei's supreme world, but he was in a passive situation. This made Na Wei extremely unhappy. Blindly defending wasn't going to work. But blocking this 8,000 years of cultivation bullet was already too much for him to split his attention. In the next second, his real body emerged from between the ancient god giant's eyebrows. But only half of his body emerged. His brain was connected to countless tubes, and his body was covered in many disgusting things. A pale white beam of light gathered in his mouth. It's ancient divine jade. A cannon shot condensed from cultivation. Qin Zong said. Ancient divine jade? I thought it was tail beast jade, but then again, isn't this cultivation different from Senior Xiang Yi's bullet? It can't be recycled. Miss Rong, you're wrong. In essence, there's no difference. The golden lamp explained, this is his supreme world, and the cannon that condensed his own cultivation will eventually be consumed in his supreme world. This is another kind of cycle. I see. Lotus Sun nodded. She was about to step forward and open the barrier of the mysterious sea, when Qin Zong stepped forward and stood in front of everyone. Lotus Sun, Senior Qin. You. At this moment, he crossed his arms confidently. Finally, he revealed his arrogant face. Miss Rong, don't waste your energy. I'm enough. Don't worry, even if I stand here and let him shoot, he'll miss. Chapter 1679. A speck of black light condensed in the middle of the white ancient god jade cannon carried the powerful power of primal chaos, which shook the nearby space and shattered it like a glass plate. This power could not be said to be not shocking, and it was so terrifying that it made one unable to breathe or speak. Senior Qin, are you really not going to use a barrier? Lotus Sun still had some misgivings about this. If this cannon hit them, given everyone's battle strength, it might not directly kill them, but it would still hurt a lot. Lotus Sun had originally wanted to use Mysterious Sea's Sword Chi barrier and Monk Jin Deng's illumination spell to strengthen the barrier. It would consume a lot of spirit power, but it might be able to withstand this blow. But now that Qin Zong was directly in front of everyone, she was at a loss. Brother Qin, can you do it? Eyes wide, Xiang Yi lay prone on the ground and averted his gaze from the scope with a doubtful expression. He actually didn't know much about Qin Zong's background, and had only heard on the way just now that Qin Zong considered himself to be the only koi in the cultivation world. Koi? There were too many lucky people in this world, and Xiang Yi felt that his luck was pretty good, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to build that wasteland cultivation world into such a spectacular place. Almost everyone who was young and accomplished in cultivation had more or less a bit of luck. Luck was something that couldn't be explained clearly, and it couldn't be seen physically. In Xiang Yi's view, relying on one's luck alone wasn't very useful. Boom! At that moment, the extremely white beam of light from the ancient god jade cannon exploded in the air like a heavenly drum. Wherever the destructive beam of light passed, everything collapsed and shattered. The earth overturned and was cut into pieces, and endless cracks spread out, blurring the scene. Countless boulders in the supreme world were smashed by the beam of light, turning into a large amount of gravel and sand that danced wildly in the sky. Qin Zong stood alone in front of everyone with his arms crossed. Jin Deng, Xiang Yi, Ling Ming, Lotus Sun, Zhua, and the others all frowned because they really believed Qin Zong's nonsense and didn't take up any defensive positions at all. God knew what would happen if such a fierce and destructive blow hit them. Qin Zong, however, stood unhurriedly in front, holding the fort. At that moment, everyone saw a seven-colored stream of air rising from his body, which shone with a mystical light. Could this be? Everyone was stunned and couldn't believe what they were seeing. This is the essence of luck. Is there really someone who can turn such an illusory thing into a substance? Even the Golden Lamp monk found it incredible. He saw that the condensed luck condensed into a huge seven-colored koi behind Qin Zong. With a flick of its tail, it instantly whipped the violent white aurora away. It actually used its own luck to change the trajectory of the aurora by a certain angle. Then, the aurora of the ancient god Jade struck the barrier of the supreme world. This barrier was originally set up by Na Wei himself to prevent Lotus Sun, Jin Deng, and the others from escaping. Unexpectedly, when the pure white ancient god Jade light beam rushed up, it was reflected back by the barrier. Killing two birds with one stone, it passed through the barrier from a strange angle and broke the two legs of the ancient god giant. With a roar of pain, his huge body fell down uncontrollably, raising a lot of dust. At the same time, Xiang Yi's bullet with 8,000 years of cultivation also hit its target. In just a short moment, under Qin Zong's terrifying luck, the limbs of the ancient god giant suffered a devastating blow. Wow! At the same time, Wang Wan couldn't help but want to make a move. She rode on Ling Ming's neck and began to wave her little childish fists, looking like she was going to beat up the ancient god giant. Wang Wan was about to make a move, but Jin Deng and the others didn't. They gave Wan enough opportunity to show off, and they stood and watched from a distance. Ling Ming used his sword energy to firmly attach Wang Wan to his shoulder, trying to make her use him as a chair in a comfortable position. The total age of the two of them added up was less than 10 years old. They were just two children, and one of them was even an infant. They didn't seem to have much lethality and destructive power. The moment their chubby little fists swung out, it seemed to bring about a kind of full confusion to people. It didn't look like they were going to hurt much. However, when Ling Ming and Wang Wan got closer, the ancient god giant, whose limbs were still recovering, let out a shrill scream. Ow! Two huge shadow arms stretched out from the ground. They were the ancient god giant's own shadow. Manipulating the two shadow arms, little girl Nguyen tore at the ancient god giant's two legs, which were still recovering, as if she was tearing chickens with her bare hands. Unexpectedly, she really did try to attack his middle, as she had said at the beginning. That scream rang out again and again. It was the ancient god giant who was injured, not him. However, the ancient god giant's nerve pain sensation was connected to his god brain. Furthermore, as a man, the most unbearable pain he could endure was being hit in the middle. The group was petrified. Little girl Nguyen's ferocity was beyond their imagination. She was just a little girl who had just been born, but she was actually able to tear the ancient god giant apart with her little body, which was the size of a grain of sand. Is this what it means to learn from others in order to subdue them? She's actually using the giant's shadow to attack the giant. As expected of the master of Shadow Dao, Loopy Toad exclaimed in admiration. But they were well aware that this wasn't all of little girl Nguyen's strength. Damn thing, I'm going to tear you to pieces. Inside the ancient god giant, Na Wei, who was controlling the giant, was enraged by the intense pain. In the blink of an eye, he had actually used a gecko's tail technique, completely abandoning his lower body that was being torn apart and separating his upper body from his body. Then, Wang Wan's left and right legs, which had been separated like chicken drumsticks, turned into a large amount of black sand, which broke down and then gathered back on his lower body with unimaginable agility. Clang! At that moment, Na Wei, who was using form displacement transposition, manipulated the ancient god giant to attack again. A golden spear appeared in his hand, which was more than 100 zhang tall and even taller than him. Holding it in one arm, he swung it with all his might. The spear pierced the air and emitted a great deal of light as it ruthlessly stabbed toward Wang Wan. That's not right. Why does it feel like his aura hasn't weakened at all after being abused? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal sensed something strange. It's because the god brain has become stronger again. His god brain wasn't fully activated before. At that moment, Monk Jin Deng said, if his god brain is really activated to the same level as the heartless ancestor back then, apart from spiritual master Nuan, no one here will be his match. You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.